Knockback, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Knockback. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother, Dagan Moriarty. Dagan, good to see you today, my friend. How are you?
Good to see you. Who's scruffy looking? Really let myself go after the wedding. It's only been a week and a half.
You look great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Dude, I'm exhausted. I slept for the first time more than 4 hours last night. Since I got back from the wedding, I was sleeping like 4 hours a night working on this commercial. Dude, it's such a great feeling of satisfaction to be done with something like that, though. Like, you know what it is?
It's a TV commercial, right?
Whatever you do in life, right? It's just whenever there's an enormous undertaking in front of you, you know, for me, it's animation. It's like, I got to animate this 4 minutes. I'm by myself. I have a week to do it, you know? And I know damn well, like, I'm going to need to take the weekend in between. Like, it's all hands on deck, you know? But when you're...
Both hands on deck. Yeah. Go on.
And when you start it, it's like that thing of like, how am I possibly humanly going to finish this thing? There's no way. You know, you're making this thing from whole cloth, right? And then at the end of it, you finally get there. And it's like, how did I do that? But it's such an enormous, all that anxiety, you're expunged of all that anxiety.
Sure.
And all that, you know, all that vitriol and toxic shit, and it's just like finally completed. Then next week it's going to be another one.
Right, exactly. More money. Like, another day, another dollar.
And you always doubt it. You're for 25 years, you're at the beginning of that journey, and you're just like, there's no way I'm going to be able to handle this. And that dynamic never changes. Isn't that weird?
Forged by fire, of course.
Listen, this is completely separate, but I have to get your opinion on this.
Yeah.
Because it keeps happening, and I keep telling myself I'm going to talk about it at the beginning of one of the shows. And I want you to weigh in as like a homeowner, as somebody who owns a home in a neighborhood, right? Every time I'm coming home, this happens several times a week. Okay. There's a kid across the street. Actually, two kids. They're twins. They're a year older than Graydon. So what is that? They're in eighth grade, right? Graydon has a really nice basketball hoop on the cul-de-sac, and the kids use it. But when I'm coming home and I'm pulling around the corner, the girls are out there using it. And then every time, inevitably, when we're pulling up, they act like they're not using it because they feel like bad, right? And they'll do the thing where they're like suddenly they're taking the basketball and they're dribbling it like a soccer ball on their knee and stuff like that. It's so obvious.
It's awesome.
And I feel so bad because they're at that age where if they were younger, I would just say, play with it, you know, but they're at that age where I don't want to embarrass them or, you know, late adolescent, early teens, whatever. But I really do want to say it's okay. Just use the basketball. You should just be like, you don't have to act like that.
Be like, listen, I know what's going on here. You know? And it's totally fine.
Just come out with my hands and my hips.
Also, you're like on our Ring doorbell or something. You know, it's not on that side of your house, I guess. So,
how do I deal with this?
I think
we can't go on like this.
I would think next time you pull in, just be like, listen, guys, you can use the basketball hoop. You know, just be very nonchalant.
Just deal with the embarrass them that one time, and then going forward. See, I think that could have an effect of, and I don't know them enough to know how it's going to play out, but it could have the effect of like, they'll just use it and not feel funny, or they'll never use it again because now they're just so embarrassed.
Well,
right?
Either way, you win. That. You know, I mean, you don't really care if they use it. You're just trying to be nice. So if they just stop using it because they're so embarrassed, like, okay, it's a win in its own way. You know, you like got a W either way. I think
I can't keep dealing with the awkwardness.
You can talk to their parents too, or something. If you see them, be like, listen, you know.
That's not a bad idea.
But that's kind of weird too, because then it's like you're thinking about it a lot, you know. That you like thought to talk to the parents, like you
clearly I'm not thinking about this at all.
You know.
Now I feel weird.
Fucking the only option is not to play. That's what these kids have to understand. Their war games.
I knew you'd understand this suburban.
Totally, it's another Larry David-esque thing.
Totally is. What's new with you, man? How you doing?
Nothing, just hanging out.
How do you feel?
I feel fine. Yeah, I feel good. I am constantly tinkering with my ring still. I've been saying this on every show. Like I'm just constantly tinkering with it. I was playing Habroxia is coming to PlayStation 5, the first Habroxia game, our second game, on the 21st of November. So I have codes and I play it. And every time I pick up the controller, actually I have a PS4 controller here. It's like,
oh yeah, because now you're hitting it on stuff.
I'm like, I'm always like closing around. I'm like, oh God. So, then I was gardening the other day and I'm like, oh, I forgot to take it off, but it's totally fine. I take it off when I work out.
I didn't ask you, what do you have there? Is it platinum?
Platinum, yeah.
Platinum, yeah. You got to go with the platinum. I was just saying to Helene the other day, I remember picking out my band in the jewelry store so many years ago, and I wanted a titanium one because I like the look of that dark metal, and it was a lot cheaper than the platinum. And Helene literally was like, you're probably never going to buy yourself a piece of platinum jewelry ever.
Right.
Like, this is the one time.
Yeah, totally.
And so I'm so glad. Yeah, there it is right there. There it is. There it is right there.
That's going to be a good screenshot. Yeah, it's and plus, who knows who dug it up? Some poor child in some third world country digging up your fucking platinum so you can wear it on your hand. Dude, I was watching this crazy video and I see something. Twitter is just a muck with crazy ass videos and the For You thread. Probably because I watch crazy ass videos, so it's giving me more and more of them. And there was like a collapsed mine in Africa where these dudes were like getting pulled out by other people. It's like,
dude,
it's crazy. Like using buckets and all these things to like dig them out. I'm like, damn, dude, it's crazy.
That's insane.
Conflict minerals on Dagan Moriarty's finger. I have no idea where. I'm not even sure if platinum is. So I was gonna get. There's some random, very weird metal that you could get. Okay. That's very like. Maybe even more expensive than platinum. That doesn't make any sense. It was something that I was talking about at the jeweler where she's like, oh, that's a very like she thing to do, but they break very easily, apparently. I can't remember what it is.
It's fragile. It's brittle.
Yeah. And I was like, she's like, they're going to break. It's going to break. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then I was talking a great deal, probably with you on the wedding episode of the NFL quarterbacks wearing their rubber wedding bands, like for their insecure wives.
I didn't know about this.
Yeah. Like most players wear gloves, but quarterbacks don't wear gloves typically, except for a couple of them on their throwing hand or on either of their hands. And so their left hand's often exposed. And you see a lot of them wearing those black, like almost elastic wedding bands. And I'm like, how insecure is your wife? Can't you just play football and make millions of dollars without having to? Yeah, it's like, give me a break, dude. I'm trying to think of who. Andy Dalton might be the first quarterback I remember doing that. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, because you don't want to wear the Met. That's a good. You don't want to get pulverized and lose your.
That would be a bad idea.
Christ.
You hear stories of Jaffe was telling some crazy story about like some guy got caught on it, like pulled his finger off. Basically, like you get doing crazy shit. You're like just take it off if you're doing anything. But
sure.
I'm also noticing how my fingers just change sizes all day. Sometimes this thing fits like, and you can't even get it off. Sometimes it's like. I'm going to like launch off like a Wiimote, like right at the screen.
That's a nice nerdy comparison. I like that side by side. Makes sense.
Before we started, I was playing drums. You said it was coming through good. I'm going to play for 10 seconds just to see how it sounds on the recording. All right.
Yeah, let's do it. Come on, let's go.
I'm going to play Korn's I'm going to play Korn. Here to Stay. All right, let's see.
All right, let's go. Yeah, it sounds good. I think it comes through clear. You guys can let us know.
Let's see how that sounds. Oh yeah, the waveforms are not. Oh, that's the wrong headphones. The waveforms are not huge. That's interesting. I thought it would be all scooped out. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds clear to me. I don't know how it's going to come through for these guys, but
I have a really small diameter floor tom for size reasons, and it's so high pitched that I basically have detuned it to the point where, hold on, let's see if you can hear it. It's basically just skin hitting. Well,
let me hear.
There. Did you hear that? It sounds like just a dead skin.
But I like the sound of that drum.
I do too, but it's like basically, I'm going to break the skin at some point. It sounds good when you're playing really loud, but when you're just, anyway, I'm very interested to see how that sounds on the microphone.
That reminds me, Kyle, have you seen Whiplash, the movie Whiplash?
No, I've only seen clips of it, including like that last scene where he's like on the snare drum and
yeah. Oh, dude.
I got to see.
You have got to watch. It's free on. You have Netflix still?
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to watch it.
Well, many people. I should really watch it. It's the guy. His teacher is the guy from Oz, right?
Yeah, J.K. Simmons.
Right, J.K. Simmons. Right.
Yeah.
The guy from Oz. That's like probably his least notable.
I still think about him.
Dude, horrifying.
You would think about him as J. Jonah Jameson, but I always think about him in that small little indie movie, Juno. I don't know.
Oh, why. Juno. Yeah.
Right.
Also, I was going to say his most famous role is in Law and Order.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that would by far be where people would know him from, I think, the most.
And Oz, super scary.
But Oz, the anal raping neo-Nazi. Good shit. I was in high school,
and
literally
the insurance guy.
I've said this about Oz before, where I was like, I was watching that. First of all, PJ lent me the DVDs when I was in high school.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And like the first, second, third season, something like that. He'll be listening, I'm sure. And I remember being like, I cannot under any circumstances go to prison. Like nothing scared me more straight than watching Oz, where I'm like, oh my God, especially because a lot of the early seasons revolves around that guy that got arrested for killing a little girl when he was drunk driving. And he's like a nerd, and he's just like totally, and they fuck with him so much to the point, I think he bites a dude's dick off at some point. Like that show is, there's like a guy who's like giving him head or whatever, and then he bites his dick off. And
oh my God, dude, I
remember that show. That show scarred the shit. I still think that's probably the most scarring show. I'd be interested. I haven't watched it really as an adult, so it's like Fire in the Sky or something for me,
It is. It's horrifying, and I think a civilian like you and I in prison, it's a horrifying thought.
Yeah.
Right. But the only thing worse could be being like a cop, like being in law enforcement.
Oh,
and
you're done.
In. Otherwise, you're doomed.
You're done.
You got to stay out.
Jake, how quick would it take you to become a neo-Nazi if you went to prison for 30 years? Be honest.
Dude, I can't even deal with the thought of it. Like prison, like the claustrophobia aspect, first of all. And then just the fact that I know, what movie deals with this a lot? We're going off on a lot of tangents, but Spike Lee's 25th Hour.
Oh, I've never seen that.
It's so good. It's a really awesome post 9/11 sort of commentary on New York. But Ed Norton plays like a Brooklyn-based drug dealer, and he gets caught by the DEA, and he's going in. And his dad is like a retired New York City firefighter who's an alcoholic who owns a bar. Like it hits home in a lot of ways. And, that whole post 9/11 feel. Barry Pepper. Who else is it?
Philip Seymour Hoffman. I was going to say he's, yeah.
Dude.
That's still my favorite line of his in Big Lebowski. It's not even a word or a sentence.
That's probably his best role.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. I mean, I know there's Boogie Nights. I know there's a million other things.
Mr. Lebowski asked me to repeat that.
Brand.
I love it. He says, her life is in your hands, dude. Mr. Lebowski asked me to repeat that. Her life is in your hands. That movie's a classic. That movie's an absolute stone cold classic. I mean,
oh, dude, so good.
What are we supposed to be doing today? Yeah, who else? Patrice O'Neal's in it. Interesting.
Yeah, Barry Pepper.
Tony Siragusa. Is that right? That's so weird.
Yeah.
The Goose.
Yeah.
$5 million budget. Not so bad.
Good. Overlooked movie. Super good. I mean, I love Spike Lee in general. I don't think he's done a bad movie. For me, I don't think he's really done a bad movie, but that's one that gets overlooked. I don't know why. Came out so close to the, post 9/11 that it was actually jarring. We were still reeling really from everybody was, when that movie came out. Might have been the first one to really deal with that. And then the Barry Pepper character is like a rich Wall Street stockbroker dude, and he lives downtown in like Battery Park near the towers, and it deals with, in a roundabout way, it really deals with what New York or the country felt like after that, But Ed Norton's just like a regular dude, and he's going to prison.
It's just so funny to me. Barry Pepper, first of all, his greatest role is Jackson in Saving Private Ryan, in my opinion, that I've seen. I love that role where he prays before every shot and stuff like that.
Dude, he's so good.
But he ends up being in like so many of those movies, because I'm looking at it. It's like Saving Private Ryan, We Were Soldiers, Flags of Our Fathers. Like he's just very World War II face,
Yeah.
which is cool. And also for people that are curious, I hate this game, but we bring it up all the time for some reason on the show. Prototype from 2009, Alex Mercer, the main character, played by Barry Pepper.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So there you go.
I'm a huge fan. I don't see him. I don't know if he's behind the camera now or what. He's like one of those guys, like, who's a good comparison? Speaking of Private Ryan, what's his name? Ed, He's married to Christy Turlington. What is his name?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I'm going to look it up real quick.
Ed Burns.
Ed Burns, right.
Like the guys that just kind of slowly retreated from being in front of the camera, and now they do, they're producers or something. But I like Barry Pepper. I could have seen him in like a Sopranos type role. He could have fit into that show. I feel like, especially when he was like 10 years ago, Barry Pepper.
Yeah, Ed Burns hasn't acted in anything since 2012 that he didn't direct.
And he's married to like a really wealthy supermodel, right? That's one of the big Hollywood stories. Like they've been married for like 30 years or something. Christy Turlington and Ed Burns, right? Yeah. And a New York fan. I think
20
Ed
years
Burns
it says married,
Queens
2003, about 20 years. It says for that. 20? Yeah, 20 years.
Oh, not as long as I thought. I'm married longer than that.
Yeah, you are. Turlington, 54 years old. Ed Burns, 55 years old.
Oh, they're not that much older than me.
Suni Oneonta. Okay, interesting. All right. Well, we're here today, Dig.
Mm-hmm.
After a long and winding, it's not actually anything compared to listen to Sacred Symbols.
We really took a walk.
Sometimes we start Sacred Symbols and we marvel at how long we go without saying anything at all.
I love that personally.
Well, I went through the Knockback kind of well, first of all, if you clicked on the episode, you know what this is all about already. But to explain it, I want to talk about kind of family gatherings. This was spurred on, holidays with the family, just family gatherings, whatever. We've kind of touched on this a little bit, but not really. I actually scrolled through the entire Knockback back catalog this morning to see. I was like, where have we might have talked about this? And very little came up except for one thing, which was number 45, Holiday Memories, which we recorded and posted in December of 2018. I think that's going to be the closest we get to this. This comes up all the time, though, because we've talked about holidays and back to school and, all the different things. But the wedding, as we kind of come off of it, we dedicated a constellation episode to it. And I think everyone's probably pretty tired of hearing about it right now. But a parting shot would be gathering of family and what it means and who the different members of the family mean to you, and any memories. Kind of a winding thing. It's very unusual for me as a content creator, and I don't know if you agree with this. These kinds of episodes don't come naturally to me as a creator because they're so easy, and people seem to like them a lot. We're like, oh, this is cool. Yeah, you did like RoboCop, but what about like just a random one? And then we do this one, and I'm like, probably people find that boring. And then those episodes do 3 times better than the episode that we put out for like something like RoboCop. So I figured it'd be good to touch on this, especially because we're going to be getting back into some games soon and some other media. So we would maybe do a parting shot with this. So what do you think about this? Just, getting together with family members, get-togethers and parties, barbecues, pool parties, celebrations, whatever.
Oh, pool parties. That's a good one. Yeah, I love this, man. I mean, this is awesome because we're rolling off the wedding. It's timely because we're coming into the holidays now. We got Thanksgiving and Christmas or whatever you celebrate. So this will be on people's mind. And you know what? From a fan perspective, like if we have those deep Knockback listeners, especially, I think about it from things that I love, like let's say Red Letter Media, right? I would love to hear, and maybe they've done this, I'm not sure. Like I want to get to know Rich, Mike, and Jay.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
I don't know anything about them. Not that I listen to all their stuff, but I don't know anything about those guys.
Yeah, just to banter on things besides movies or whatever they're lampooning or whatever they're talking about. Like just in a getting to know you capacity, like I would so dig that. Like just learning about them and learning about their Milwaukee roots or whatever. So I could see this being really fun. And you know what, man? Like in this big old deep, I don't know what you want to call it, grab bag of nostalgia that I lug around in my brain.
I'll give you a grab bag.
My memories of hanging out with family, especially family gatherings, really is such a big chunk of that. It doesn't even matter like what you said the specific gathering was or is on that hierarchy. Like it could be holidays, birthdays, barbecues. I love the pool party thing, milestone events like graduations and communions and weddings, right? Or it could be simple as like very basic conventional Sunday dinners. It didn't matter. Like they're all of equal importance, and they were and are essential. They're still essential, and they play a key part in my memories. Just the dynamics, the food, the people involved, both sides of the family growing up. Now I have 2 sides of the family with my wife's family. So I think it's a pretty broad, it casts a pretty broad net in terms of conversation, I think. And it's on my mind a lot, especially now. And you could probably relate to this a little bit too, in that the family dynamic is changing for me because we have kids getting ready to go to college. So things are going to get altered a little bit as far as the shape of the family. And also our parents are getting older. And my in-laws, Helene's parents, are getting older. So there's a little bit of, I don't want to bum people out by saying it this way, but a little bit of savoring it now, because I don't know how long it's going to last in its current state, right? Like the way it looks right now, having everybody together in its current 2023 form. I don't know. It's like there's something about just not taking it for granted and just trying to kind of hold on to it. And also for my kids, like, and I laugh about this a lot because I was so into the anthropology and the history of the family, even as a little kid. Like, I wanted to know stories. I wanted to know how this one connected to that one and what their relationships were like. And my kids seem very disinterested. They're also pretty young still. But there's something about taking that from my childhood into my adult life that hasn't changed. Like, I don't know if it's the camaraderie, the history, the warmth, the humor, the food. I guess it's a combination of all of those things, and just kind of one of the great pleasures of life for me. And, I'm really grateful that we still have it. And that mine's really grown because now I have another family that I love just as much as my own family. And Helene's family.
Just as much?
Just as much? Maybe more.
If Mrs. Catherwood and me were hanging off a cliff, each by one hand. Remember I made you do this with your kids?
Listen, yes, you did.
That might be on a really old episode of Knockback.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I definitely think it is.
Where I had to come to terms with the fact that you wouldn't save me. So again, me and Miss Catherwood hanging off the cliff. Who are you going to say?
In that case, I would have to go for you because she already lived such a long life. It's not fair, right? Colin's not even 40. She's 70, whatever she is.
Me or Cheryl?
Oh, Cheryl's older.
She's got a kid though. She's got kids.
That's true, man. That's true.
You better think deep and hard about this. You got 2 seconds.
Yeah, I would go for you.
I'm going to fall off the building like in RoboCop at the end. The guy falling off into like the matte painting.
We could take Cheryl's kids, although they still have a dad.
Yeah, right. And he can hang. Yeah. This is more complex than you might have thought. Anyway, I interrupted you. That was a total tangent.
We going back to you and Mrs. Catherwood. I'd have to go for you because she lived such a long, rich life already. It's not fair. She's got 30 years on you, 30 something years.
Do you call them mom and dad?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Dating back a long time.
But maybe that's your word for them is mom and dad, like mom specifically.
Yeah, dad mom and dad. Yeah.
Because I don't think I said this to you at the wedding. Micah's dad, who's really nice. We have a nice relationship with each other. We text with each other back and forth and stuff. And I respect he's like very much like me where he doesn't really want to talk to people and he's kind of like, but he's very social. And at the same time, when he's in these situations and he was like, he was drinking a little bit and he's like, I would really mean a lot to me if you called me Pops. Because
Pops.
Yeah. That's what Micah calls her dad. And I was like, all right, yeah, sure. And then he was later on, he was like even more drunk and he came up to me, he's like, what's my name? And I'm like, Pops, your name's Pops. And that's funny because I call dad Pop. Right. So
yeah, that's right.
I call mom Ma and dad Pop. I don't know where I got those things from, but so that's why I was curious if they added a specific
name. The Pops thing, Kyle, because first of all, Micah's parents are awesome. They were really funny. I really got a kick out of them at the wedding. But I like the Pops thing because it's a nice way for an icebreaker. I need to get I'm going to be controversial for a minute. I hope the wrong people don't hear this, but I got to get your take on this because it's been bothering me.
Hit me.
Okay. One of my sister-in-laws has a boyfriend. All right. I only have 2 sister-in-laws and one's married with kids, so we know which sister-in-law to talk about.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Well, you never know. Yeah.
He hasn't been on the scene very long. Now think back in context. Helene and I have been married for 21 years. We've been together for 27. So almost 30 years that I've known my in-laws. Okay. And I didn't start calling them mom and dad until we got married. So now we're 6-7 years in. Okay. Just for a little history and comparison. Okay. Now this new boyfriend comes. He's not new, but let's say it's 3 years. I don't think it's been that long yet. 3 years max. We were at an event, a family event the other day, a couple of weeks ago. And he called my father-in-law dad. And my ears immediately got pricked to this, and I was pissed. I didn't say anything. But later on when I got home, and Helene thinks I'm very negative, and Helene's very, very positive, and she thinks I could be very judgy. But, I said to her, we were washing dishes or something. I said to her, did you hear so-and-so call your dad? And she's like, no, I didn't hear it. And I was like, he didn't earn that. He has not earned that yet. You know what I mean? I took great exception to it. Right. And what do you think of that? Am I being too harsh in thinking that?
No, I mean, the only thing that that would allay that fear is if maybe, which doesn't seem like something your father-in-law would do, but something where he's like, you can call me dad. I don't think he would say that he doesn't strike me as the kind of man who say that. I think he's very, very nice. But he's much more, they're old school and, more of a old school couple. I mean, they're a little older. And so I doubt he's going to go up to like his daughter's boyfriend and be like, oh, call me dad.
He would. I can't see him doing that.
Right.
He's not.
So it's
very
weird.
Demonstrative.
It's weird. Well, right. That's kind of my vibe of him. I mean, I've known him for many years too, not to any of the degree you have, but yeah, he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that's going to gregariously go up to like the new guy and be like, oh, call me dad or whatever. It's
right.
Like, no, I feel like you're going to have to earn it with him a little bit. And,
he's polite. So he's not going to say, don't say that.
Right.
Right. Like Uncle Mike could do it in a joking way because he's very charismatic and he's very affable. Uncle Mike. Charlie is much different. He's actually quite funny. He makes me laugh, but he has a very complex personality. You have to get to know him. There's no way I would have called him dad 2 or 3 years in. I was still getting to know him then. I feel like this guy's never even around. I'm like, who the hell is this guy?
It's presumptuous.
It's too much.
It's presumptuous on multiple levels. Are they going to get married or?
I don't know. They better now.
I mean, yeah, now the die is cast. Yeah, it's a little weird. I feel like I got to be careful saying stuff like this because and I'm half joking, but I feel like it's very foot in the door. Right. Oh, yeah.
It's like I'm making my aspirations and my goals known. And this is kind of the way I'm doing it. I'm chipping away at it by doing things like this. It is. I think you said it. For me, it's a little presumptuous. I could be very old fashioned though. So I have to kind of temper myself a little bit. Maybe I am being a little bit of a dick with that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think so. I think it is weird. I would be more possessive. If I were him, I'd be more self-conscious of it because I would think that it was weird. That's obviously a big move. And something that I wonder, it's not usually about the comfort of the kid though. It's usually about the comfort of the older person. I'm sure there are plenty of people that do not want to call these people mom and dad, that they, like their in-laws or whatever. And they're like, they have to do it. They'd rather call them Mr. Smith or whatever.
Yeah, it's true. It's got to be natural. It's just got to feel, it's one of those elusive things that you can't really explain. It just, when it's ready to happen, it just happens. I always wonder about it with dad. I mean, our maternal grandparents were such warm, wonderful people and, like my favorite people who ever lived. But I never remember dad feeling awkward or looking like it was weird for him to call grandma and grandpa mom and dad. He just did it. And they treated him like a son and he treated them like a parent. And that whole thing was in the offing before I even came along. But it is kind of fascinating. It's actually kind of part of this conversation a little bit too.
No, certainly. Right? In the sense that with dad, I think maybe, and this is the multi-layered nature of the mom and dad, like calling the spouses mom and dad is he was probably seeking a little bit of that out. He had a bad relationship with his dad. His mother passed away. We never knew his mom.
Sure.
Long before we were.
Great point, man.
So, and that's always weird. That's always been a very weird thing to me that I've never really thought too deeply about. It's like, yeah, I don't even know grandma. Like,
no,
really don't know her. Marie,
she
right?
Passed
that was
when
her
dad
name?
Was 17, right?
Yeah.
Or 18.
17 or 18, yeah.
Yeah.
And
so
her name was Marie, right? Is that right?
Who was?
Dad's mom's name is Marie.
Oh, Marie, Grandma Marie. Yeah. No, we never know. We know her from photos.
Yeah. And so that's interesting. I wonder if that was part of that with dad too, because not only were they very maternal and paternal on the Ruggiero side, but they, dad was kind of missing that in his life because he had he had a close relationship with his mom and she died of cancer. And then, his dad, he had a bad relationship with, although they kind of mended when they were older, I guess.
I think so.
I don't really know what happened there. I really only remember meeting him a couple times in my entire life, his dad personally. So That's again
so
what we were saying
crazy.
during the marriage episode of Constellation was that I'm at such a disadvantage, unfortunately, with the Moriarty family. I want to know them better. I have a good time with them. They're very friendly and amiable and funny
awesome.
and sweet, and it's like, what happened here? Like, I don't understand why this, like, what fell through, or it wasn't like a falling out. I don't think it was that. I think there was probably some awkwardness from mom and dad getting divorced, but you would know more than me. Like, it didn't ever really seem like it was a huge thing for us to hang out with that side of the family. And now that it's not reversed itself because we still hang out heavily with the Italian side of the family, but now that we've ingratiated ourselves, or they've ingratiated themselves with us more, and so on and so forth, and I'm exchanging emails with Uncle Michael and like doing all these, which our dad's brother.
Yeah. My godfather.
Right. Who's great. He's a great guy. He's smart.
Awesome.
He's an entrepreneur, and he was an exec at FedEx for many years.
Yeah.
And he did really, really well for himself, and he's like a tech investor now and all that kind of stuff. And so you learn a lot from them, and it's like, damn, dude, like that's kind of part of why I wanted to talk about this today, was just through the lens of the wedding, was I guess how we kind of interacted with everyone we saw. See, from my perspective, and you can relate to this, although I don't know how much you remember the blow to blow of your wedding is, like first of all, I don't really want to be the focal point of anything. So that's totally fine. And I don't say that with modesty or any faux anything. It's like, I really don't like being the center of attention, which is very strange for being the head of a podcast network, but I can do it in a microphone and we have fun, and I don't have to perform in certain ways and their expectations and all the rest. Like, that's why I think live shows are funny, because that's kind of when I have to turn that part of me off. But the wedding, it's all about you and your spouse. And so I'm having these really interesting interactions with everyone. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, I guess, in some way, was like, what were your interactions like with people at the wedding? Like, you go to someone, right? All right. So let's say Aunt Joni, which is our mother, has two sisters, they're twins, and they're younger than her. And so there's three girls, and Aunt Joni and Aunt Carla are the two girls. Aunt Carla's married to our Uncle Mike, who is a legendary figure, and our Aunt Joni's married to Uncle John, who they got married in the early 90s, and I was actually their ring bearer.
Yeah,
in that wedding.
dude.
And which was awesome. And how you have random funny memories? I have a funny, interesting memory of going to get my suit with them. Like, how we all wore the same suits?
Yes.
Like, they picked me up in a limo, and it was like, all of his boys and Uncle Peter and like all these different dudes. And it was, I remember it really well. It's very strange. And so you interact with Aunt Joni. What happens? What do you guys talk about? Now, she and you have a very special relationship.
Yes.
You're probably, I would say, easily her favorite. The thing about Aunt Joni that I feel bad about is, more than anyone, she has made a real effort with me, and she has always been like that. Yeah. To her credit, she was really, really, and Uncle Mike and Aunt Carla were like this too. I just think it had a different vibe because they were married by the time I knew them. They got married, I think, the year I was born. Maybe
I think that's right.
Maybe a couple of years before that or something. So I always knew them as a couple. So we would go and visit them and have dinner with them and stuff. But it was a different vibe. It was very funny. Uncle Mike would drive like a fucking maniac down the LIE, pretend he was hitting in the cars, like, letting us watch satellite TV and all, all that kind of stuff. And that was awesome. Aunt Joni had a different vibe because Aunt Joni had a longtime boyfriend, Tommy. And there's actually a great picture of me sitting on Tommy's lap, I think like asleep or something like that. Oh, shit. Yeah, like on a couch at grandma's house. And he has like a Bud Heavy in his hand or something, because I was like, I remember that about him, was that he drank Bud Heavies. And they had a falling out of some sort. So in the late 80s, maybe. And then
that's right.
Aunt Joni, and I have no idea what that was about, and it's not my business, obviously. But then Aunt Joni, Aunt Joni has his name tattooed on her leg, or at least did. I don't know if that's still there or not.
I don't know if she covered that up or not.
So she met Uncle John, probably 89, 90 or something like that. They got married pretty quickly after that, and he's been a member of the family now for all this time, and he's awesome. It was great to see him.
Oh, he's the best.
And we're going to see him again because their kid is getting married in April in South Carolina, so we're going to be down there for that. But I just want to give everyone kind of the vision of who these people are to us. So Aunt Joni used to really, like, I remember Uncle John and Aunt Joni bringing me to see Gravedigger at Nassau Coliseum. Like, they used to remember
when they did that.
Yeah, and like I had the poster.
I wasn't there, but I
had the poster and everything, and they used to like bring me to Ground Round and Mets games, which I know is a big thing with you too, and and all the rest. And so that's kind of the relationship we have with her. And to her credit, she's always really tried to keep like a familiar relationship with me, and I've done the best I could, but I've gotten so much more anxious as time has gone on that I've kind of withdrawn from those different places, like on Facebook or whatever, and don't really want to talk on the phone. And so I feel like it's kind of damaged me and her's relationship the most. Otherwise, I think I would be maybe in the running as well. But she was really good to us. So like so anyway, that's a long aside. When you see her, like what happens at a family reunion? Like what do you haven't seen her maybe in 6 months or a year? Where does the conversation go? What happens?
Yeah, it had been that long. I mean, it's kind of a problem because I know I only have so much time, right? Not only at the event, but that whole weekend, right? And there's so many people that I want to interact with. And kind of everybody in some way is up high on the hierarchy, but Aunt Joni is very high up on the hierarchy. She's my buddy dating back to when I was a kid. You know, Mom has these younger twin sisters, and I was always very close to both of them. And Aunt Carla and Uncle Mike has always been sort of a unit because even before they got married, I knew Uncle Mike. Uncle Mike grew up across the street from Grandma and our aunts.
Yeah, Mom used to watch him, I think, as a kid.
Yeah, she was his babysitter.
Yeah.
And his parents, Aunt Lynn, and like everybody, like this was like one big family. So there is a really rich history dating back with Aunt Carla and Uncle Mike. But Aunt Joni was a special type of thing because she kind of took me under her wing from a very early age. And I'll post a really great picture I think you might have given me of me and Aunt Joni, I think right before we were taking one of our trips up to New Hampshire to see family. And we're sitting on Grandma's front stoop. And I think I'm like 12, 13. I'm all decked out like the current skate gear. That's like all the Vision streetwear and shit. It's a great snapshot of an era. And Aunt Joni looks and she is young. She's super young. She's what, 24 years old at that point or something, right? So
that's crazy.
It's interesting,
man.
But that's when there's an event like that, she's one of the ones I have to go to first and spend the longest with, just because that, her level of importance, and also because she moved down to southern South Carolina. So she's deep down in the South.
Oh, she's down there.
She's down there, my friend. Give it to us. Just give us one.
Oh, she's down there, just living a little bit more deliberately down there in South Carolina.
I'll tell you, man, I still think about this and it still smarts. I guess right before they left Long Island, right? Uncle John and Aunt Joni are both from Long Island, spent their entire lives on Long Island, moved about less than 2 years ago. And finally decided they couldn't deal. They lived in Levittown, which is kind of deep in Nassau County, very built up, very frenetic, right off, Hempstead Turnpike. I mean, it's crazy there. And they just had it. They spent their entire lives there, 60 something years old. They were just ready to kind of retire and go somewhere quiet. And right before they left Long Island, our little cousin, Allie, their daughter, had her college graduation party. And I knew it was the last time we were going to have an event or a get together on Long Island. And it was really melancholy for me. Like, it was really kind of sad knowing this is the end of an era. I remember I met, if I'm not mistaken, I met Mom and Larry at their Jersey house, and we drove down to Long Island to go to the party together. And that entire day, kind of cast a kind of pall on the whole thing, because I was just like, this is it. Like, this is the last time I'm going to be at their house in Levittown. This is the last time we're going to convene on Long Island, have a backyard barbecue. It was a lot of fun. And there was a lot of family on Mom's side of the family that I don't get to see a lot. Like our Uncle Tommy from Staten Island was there, and our various aunts and uncles, and people that I don't really interact with a lot, especially since Grandma and Grandpa passed away. These are their various nieces and nephews and stuff, cousins and stuff like that. So that was really cool. But I remember Aunt Joni saying, like, let's just kind of steal away, you and I, for a couple of minutes. I have to go to the store. She had to get a cake, or she had to get something from the bakery, whatever it was. And that half hour of just taking a car trip with her up the street to go get some groceries or whatever, I knew that was the last time that was the last time I was going to be spending with her on Long Island, doing something just me and her. And it was really
full circle. Yeah, it's interesting.
It's like, wow, this is the last time, thinking back to being 7, 8, her driving out east to come pick me up for the weekend, or going to Mets games, or going to Queens. She's the one who really introduced me to, Grandpa introduced me to Manhattan because of his salon and working in New York his whole life. But Aunt Joni's really the one who introduced me to Brooklyn and Queens, because her longtime ex-boyfriend Tommy lived in Astoria, or Jackson Heights technically. So she really opened up so many worlds for me. Not to say anything of Flushing and Shea Stadium back then and going to Mets games and everything. She was really instrumental in my life. So when everybody's getting together, Aunt Joni and Uncle John, who's just like one of the beloved figures in my life, and also not, what he's been around since the late 80s. This guy's been around since I was a kid. He's bona fide family at this point. Let's be honest, dating back many years. So that's the thing of, when you're at an event like that, I don't know how you feel. And you weren't really a civilian at this event. You were kind of the centerpiece of this thing. You were presiding over it. So it's a little different for me, but I do feel like I have to make the rounds, but I want to spend the bulk of my time with the Aunt Jonies, with the PJs, with Uncle Mike and Aunt Carla, my nephews, our sister Dana's kids, who I don't get to see a lot, with Derek, with the people that
those guys are a few clowns, aren't they?
The people that you really love and miss.
Yeah.
And again, what's cool about it though, man, now that we're kind of spread to the four winds, this family, especially our mom's side of the family, you really cherish every get together like this. Everything takes on a whole new meaning and a kind of a higher level of importance because we don't get to do it as much. We're not 20 miles apart now, just on various towns on Long Island. We're all over the place. We're all over the country. That's only going to become even more aggravated as my kids go to school, as my nephews go to school. It looks like my daughter's going to school in Georgia. Our nephew is almost certainly going to school in Boston. So what's interesting though, man, and not to even go off on a tangent, but I'm kind of excited for our nephew to potentially go to school in Boston, because I was saying to Helene on our way home from Virginia, you know what? Now we got like a captive audience in Dana and Derek going back, and the boys going back and forth. They have to drive through Philly to get from Richmond to Boston. So now we got, we'll be able to kind of play this up for its positives. In other words, they could come stay with us, right? We're a little closer. So if anything, God forbid, if Declan ever needed us, we're really not that far away, right? And then Helene's like, well, they're going to want to stay out with your dad. I was like, no, that's too far. They're going to need us. We're going to be like a way station now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Dad's too far out east. It's too much of
it's too far out.
It's too much of a time sink at that point. Unless they go out there and then they like take the ferry from like Orient to Connecticut.
That's true. Yeah. Oh God, talk about seasick.
Yeah, the Port. I used to live on that Port Jeff Bridgeport ferry because I would come back and forth from Long Island to Boston all the time.
Oh, that's right.
And I was also for my college girlfriend was from Connecticut, so I was also just there all the time.
Dad insisted on not driving around. And I guess it did make sense because we lived so far out east that the ferry did make sense.
Yeah, totally. Right? It's just straight north to Port Jeff and you're out.
Yeah.
As long as you time it well and all of that. But yeah, the ferry was like a way of life. And then I started taking it like as a person without a car. Like you would just like a passenger. You can pay like a small fee and cross over to Bridgeport and take your life in your own hands over there. Yeah, it's interesting. I am interested in it's very weird with Declan getting to be our oldest nephew to be going to college this year in the fall. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Next year. I'm sorry. I don't know where I am right now. 2024 in the fall. And
yeah, God,
it's crazy because I told him this. I'm like, dude, this is the corniest, lamest shit. And I know it's like eye roll worthy, but I remember when you were born. Like, it's very difficult for me to square that. I remember coming home from college. Everyone came home. It was a pretty big deal. And I remember that like really well. And there's a picture of it, of all of us together with him, like as a little infant and in Dana's old house in their kitchen.
He came first before our daughter.
Right. Exactly.
Year and a half.
Yeah. Because it was Declan and then your daughter, Lilia, and then Finley, and then Graydon, right? Then Ayla, then Dash.
Right.
So, nice little ping pong there through all that. And so, it's exciting that he'll experience his college years in the same city that I did, just right on the other side of the Fenway, which is so strange, like a mirror image of it. And because it looks like he's going to go to BU. And,
that's a good city to go to school.
So what about Aunt Carla and Uncle Mike? So I see them all the time. So my relationship with them has kind of evolved into a much more familiar, like I don't have to sit down and we don't have to talk for a half an hour every time I see you kind of thing, which is fine, but we just don't feel the need to do that. I also text with Uncle Mike fairly often about football and other things. We also have a family thread that we often text on called Virginia Family. That's like everyone just here. That's like where it's like, oh, I want to have a barbecue thing, or I have, you know, like food that's going bad if anyone wants it, or whatever the case might be, that kind of thread. So when you saw them at the wedding, how did that go?
Oh man, I mean, Uncle Mike and Aunt Carla, just in terms of, not only in terms of how much I love them, but as far as people that were so important from day one, I mean, they rank among the very highest. I mean, they were always a huge part of my life. You know, I just remember, it's so funny to think back of how young they were, though, only being, you know, whatever, a decade or so younger than mom and dad, you know, but I always thought of them as adults, but from my earliest memories, they were kids. They were so young. They took, you know, these stories, Kyle, of that kind of predate you being born, but Uncle Mike and Aunt Carla with me and Dana, when they would take us out, whether they would take us to the diner or that they would take us bowling or just take us for the weekend to hang out and take us to the park and for ice cream and all the things they did with us and how good they were to us, they would literally act like we were their kids. So it was kind of fun for them. You know what I mean? It was this type of thing where they didn't say call us mom and dad, but it was everything short of that. Like the appearance was supposed to be like, you guys are our kids, and look out. And really kind of the charm of that, not realizing when I was that age, but now looking back, it was like they were really young to have kids that
right.
So it was awesome. Kind of funny.
Yeah.
And probably nobody saw it that way. But they were like our second set of parents, essentially. And they were, again, thinking, you can't think of, it's one of those couples in your life. Not only did I always admire their relationship and how fast their love was for each other, because they were really one of the first examples of that, you know, for me, but also just in how much they just modeled all of that always. And they were always together. Like they were I can't think of one without the other. It's one of those people in my life where it's just like, I hate to say it this way because it seems like I'm throwing other people under the bus, but if I had to pick two people in my life that I know that would be together forever, it would be them. Like there's no way. There's no one without the other. It's this symbiotic relationship. And I always kind of love them individually and admire them. And they're two different people, let's be honest. You know, the kind of bickering and the way Aunt Carla's a lot more uptight and Uncle Mike's a lot more laid back and hilarious. And I think they kind of need each other. There's that relationship where they complement each other. Mm-hmm. And it's because they're not alike. They're really not. But despite all that, or maybe because of that, they really love and appreciate each other. And you could see that. And it was that way when they were in their 20s. And it's that way now in their 60s. It's remained a constant. And they're just always a pleasure. And then kind of lump in our little cousin Jamie, their daughter, who's not so little anymore. She's not so young, but I still think of Jamie as a baby.
Yeah, she's only 4 years younger than me. I see her pretty
4
often
years.
too.
That's right.
Yeah, she was born in 88. Yeah.
So they're one of the people that I got to be careful because because they're so delightful and because I love them and appreciate them. And now not seeing them as often, I want to catch up with them more. You know, I have to really be conscious of, I can't spend all my time with Aunt Carl and Uncle Mike. It's like, I got to steal myself off and then kind of spread myself around a little bit, you know, and maybe kind of spend time with other people because they're my go-to in a way. You know, there's comfort there. You don't have to be on. It's like, we know each other. There's that whole thing. There's that whole dynamic. There's the warmth and there's the genuine, like just wanting to be like, what's new? I haven't seen you in 6 months.
Right.
You know, we haven't really sat down and talked since last Thanksgiving, whatever it is. So they're really high up on the list. And, you know, like that's one of the things that makes me sad that I'm not as close to them physically, geographically anymore. But again, just in celebrating the appreciation of spending those few times a year where we do get to hang out in the same room because, dude, I don't think, if I think back, if you think in terms of family and history and origins and really a richness of knowing each other and this bond, especially on our maternal side of the family, they're a huge part of that glue. Like if I think of family gatherings, again, whether it was holidays or events or my various graduations or kind of religious milestones with confirmations and communions and all that, they were there for all of it. Every single thing, every memory, they're a huge part of that. And played a key part in my life and our lives. And, they're really kind of that adhesive. They're there for everything. If I think back to a very nostalgic, warm memory, kind of orange glazed patina, 70s, 80s, they're part of it. Their faces are in that. And it wouldn't have been the same without them, type of thing. We talk about our dad's side of the family and how they were also instrumental in our growing up, although there was a very different demeanor to dad's side of the family and mom's side of the family. And I think it came down to familiarity because we spent a lot more time with mom's family. But what's cool about dad's family, though, is that there is a closeness with them. They're awesome people. There's a big part of me that in that time of being like maybe mid-teens to now, like where I didn't see them as much. And a lot of that really did, you're correct, it really played up. It was played up by mom and dad's divorce. And just that the way that could inevitably divide a family. That's just the way it goes. That's the dynamic. But there's a closeness with them as a unit that you could see that doesn't feel like it can't be broached. Like they don't feel like they're not also accepting other people into it, So it's a different dynamic, but it's really dad's family is no different in terms of fun, in terms of warmth, and in terms of really feeling like a very pronounced, very real, genuine love for each other, But with Aunt Carl and Uncle Mike, it's like I can't, outside of mom and dad, I can't see two people that I'm more comfortable with, because they know everything about me, good and bad, because they've known me from the time I was born.
Yeah, totally.
Crazy.
Uncle Mike always uses my birthday he remembers my birthday specifically because it was the day I think they bought their house or something like that. They closed on their house.
Interesting.
So it's the same day, and that's how he always remembers it. So I always thought that was an interesting quirk of things too. But yeah, with dad's side, it's interesting too because, and I lament this when I see people. So I think this is like this for a lot of people, but you see someone before you can really get into the nitty gritty, you kind of have to broach all of the, oh, how are you? It's great to see you. What's going on? And blah, blah, blah. And then so it's like you get that out of the way, but then that armor kind of grows back as the time passes. And then so you see them again, and then you have to kind of get through that. And before you know it, you just are stuck in this cycle of saying hello and how are you? And like the niceties, which is great, but never really being able to sit down and say anything deeper than that. And
right.
That's kind of the bummer for me because I can do that very easily with the Blakes and the Bursinos because of just a high level of familiarity and kind of a very casual nature of that. But with the Moriarty side, it's difficult because that's why I was kind of grateful for the dad wanted to do like a so-called rehearsal dinner the night before at a local restaurant, which was awesome. But there was nothing to really rehearse because we didn't really have much of a ceremony. It was very simple. It was over in 15 minutes. And so we just got together with his side of the family. And you're right. One of the things that I really love and I think we can mimic from them and that we somewhat do mimic even in our worst times, which are not very bad between the four siblings on our side is and I don't take offense to this at all. I have no doubt that much of their willingness to go to things is because they get to hang out with each other.
Sure.
And that's awesome. I know they're there for us and the appreciation and ode of us too. And that means a lot to us. And it means a lot that family is that deep, but I know and I see in them that they really love being with each other and they just look for excuses to do it. And that's dope. And I really, really respect that. And I know that from my interpretation of it, it seems like it was in the mid to late 90s that they kind of got together as a unit of 6 siblings and started really hanging out and seeing each other a lot. And maybe I'm wrong. And maybe dad was just not included in that for a while because of what was going on with mom and all of the rest and the nature of his family compared to other people's families. And people were kind of scattered a little bit to the wind. But that's the one thing that I kind of, it's a bummer about that is you want to be able to It's the difference between standing and talking to someone and sitting and talking to someone. It's just
That's
always
well said.
standing and talking to someone, but you never get to be like, let's take a seat. And then that's like the second layer, right?
Let's get deep, right?
Just anywhere deeper. And and it just never gets to that point, unfortunately.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, that really speaks to me. It's well said, because you can never really get past that ice breaking thing, because every time you see each other, because of the rhythm of it, and it's nobody's fault. You never really get past that barrier for entry where it's like, now we could break into, we've done all that niceties aside. Now we could get deeper and really catch up, and it's true with dad's side of the family. Our aunts and uncles and cousins, they're spread out as well. I mean, I think about just who was represented at that wedding on dad's side: New York, Maryland, North Carolina, Florida. Our Aunt Christine wasn't there, but she's down in Florida. And so they're spread out as well. So it is a good opportunity for them to catch up as well. And you know what? Thinking about dad's family and the time we've spent over the years, over the decades with them, it really has always been the same. That family bond and the love and the fun they have together has always been the same. That's always existed. It's just that, I don't know, there's something weird. And people say this is true, and I guess it often applies. I don't think it'll be this way for you and Micah, because you and Micah geographically are states away from Micah's family, right? So this won't apply to you, but they often say that a man and woman often settle down or become closer to the wife's family. Now, in my sort of case, especially geographically, that is true. And that was always the agreement with Helene and I, because very early in our relationship, still when we were in art school talking about this, dating, maybe 2 years in, the conversation was, from my side was, listen, when I graduate, I'm out. Like, I'm going to California. That's where everything is. Thinking about, there's a minuscule amount of what I do of animation in New York, but really got to go to Cali, right? It's Southern California. It's LA or bust, really. And the thing was this dynamic of Helene not wanting to leave her family, and saying, okay, well, I'll acquiesce, and then we could, I'll build a career in New York, which I was able to do. And we were always geographically close to her family, and her family is very close, a close-knit family, right? And the part of that was hard for me was I had a very close family too, even at the time of my college years, we were already spread out, right? So it was a lot harder to pin down, well, where do I go? Where my dad is, where my mom is, where one of my siblings is. We were all over the place already, essentially. So that was weird. Here's where I think it's interesting, though, Carl, with mom and dad, because if you guys that are listening think of the dynamic of my mom and dad, they grew up a town apart. They knew each other dating back to maybe elementary school, junior high, but kind of not really being on each other's radar. Like, they were the background of each other. They didn't really know each other, although they might have known the face, right? But growing up about a town apart from each other on Long Island, and that's where their families were too, and that's where their families stayed their entire childhood and adult lives, there was sort of a choice made to be closer to mom's family. And I don't know if that was part dad sort of acquiescing to, well, I'm not really that close with my dad. There was some sort of falling out anyway with his one remaining parental unit. Or if it was the type of thing of like, mom just has a very close-knit, lovey-dovey, kind of conventional Italian family. And they're welcoming you into it. Now, I don't know if it was part of dad giving in, because I know what that is. You kind of give in to and say, okay, what you're pitching makes sense, right? I could, even as somebody in my early 20s, when Helene and I were having those conversations, I remember thinking that way, like, okay, this is a new thing for me to wrap my head around, but what you are pitching to me does compute. It does. Okay, yeah, I understand. But also, I love what you said at the top of the show, where maybe that was just an appealing thing to dad. That warmth, that welcoming nature, the easygoing thing where everything's not a battle, and just the love. Just having that demonstrative love, which I did always see that as the difference between our Italian side and our Irish side of the family. you know, those good times and people laughing and people having fun and people genuinely enjoying each other always existed on dad's side of the family, whether Poppy was having something at his house. And you know what? The other thing is that we don't give dad's family enough credit for. The food was always good. It wasn't Italian food often. But, you know, our grandfather, our Poppy, our fraternal grandpa was a caterer. That's what he did professionally. The man knew how to cook. He owned a couple of bars as well. So he was in food service. He, you know, he could wield a spatula. You know what I mean? It wasn't like the food was bad. So
he might beat the shit out of you with it as well.
Well, that was the difference. The wooden spoon was for stirring the gravy and for kicking the shit out of you. Yeah. That was the problem. But you know, that was the difference, was that, you know, I guess parents or young families make that decision. You know, what I wonder about is, do you know anybody who kind of walks that fine line and is as close to both sides of the families? Does that ever exist?
Maybe only in like very, like the example I'm thinking of is like my friend Doug and his wife Meg. I went to school, both of them in college, both of them. They've been dating since they were basically like in high school, and they're still together today. They're married, obviously. And they're both from the same small town in Maine, and everyone knows each other. And there's, you know, everyone played on the hockey team and, you know, like that kind of thing. And I think that might be an example of that, just because of their geographical bounds of knowing each other for so long and then interacting with each other so long. And I got that vibe when they got married at their wedding, that there was kind of a division of labor there. But yeah, generally speaking, I don't know. It's funny because I never really had to deal with it, which is so funny. Since I was in high school, my high school girlfriend, Megan, was very close to her family and they were very nice to me. But that doesn't really count. I mean, when you think back about like high school, it's like, I don't know. It was funny, you know, it was cool. And we're still boys. So I have, you know, I'm friends with her still to this day, but her family were really nice to me. And I think that would have, because it was just me and dad, but on her side, it was like her two brothers wanted to fucking kill me, I think, half the time. And then her parents and like extended family and all this kind of stuff. And so, and they were really sweet. But after that, my girlfriend in college grew up very wealthy, divorced parents, and didn't really seem to get along, or not get along, but didn't seem unusually close to her family. She was closer to her mom, I think. And unfortunately, and I just thought of this recently because I hadn't thought of this in a while. She and I haven't even talked to each other in 15 years. So it's been a long time, but her sister committed suicide when we were in college. And that really was horrifying. And
that's hard.
And so I think that really fractured that too. So I didn't really, so with her, I didn't really deal too much with that family stuff. And then when I dated a girl that I went to high school with, as you know, and she was very Italian and she came from kind of a big family, a bunch of sisters and stuff like that. And they were nice, but I think we were in California, so you weren't really gravitating towards anyone. It was just kind of us out there. And then when we would go home, you'd see everybody, and then you would go back to California. And the same thing with my ex, where it's like she was close to her family in Massachusetts, but again, everyone was just far away from each other. So I never really had to experience it. But now that I'm here, just based on geography, we've ingratiated ourselves to the Moriarty family, you know. And
yeah, you have that. Yeah. You guys have that built-in thing. Now, if you guys want to travel to Mass for Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever the event, somebody's getting married.
She really doesn't. Like, I mean, she really doesn't, because I'm totally down. I'm totally down.
Want to do that.
Not really. I mean, first of all, I think Mike, I'll let Micah speak for herself, but I think I feel like she's been really heavily welcomed into the family and likes our family. And so maybe I'm wrong, doesn't really mind being around them. Like there have been times where I'm like, I can't go to this barbecue at Uncle Mike's today. I'm busy. Like I just have to do the shit. And she just goes by herself, you know? So that kind of thing where I'm like, okay, that's great. And
it's a pickup family. I mean, I could relate to that a little bit in the sense of like, I'll always need, I'm speaking for me and my relationship with mom, you know, our mom and dad. Like I'll always need mom and dad as my conventional mom and dad, but I've always had figures in my life, whether it was PJ's parents or Aunt Joni and Uncle John or Uncle Mike and Aunt Carla, like the surrogate parent thing where it's like, oh, this is a pickup family, you know? And I certainly think about Helen and Charlie, Helene's parents, that way, where it's like, you do take a certain level of comfort of having that mom figure, that fraternal figure around in place of your parents. Yeah. And there's enough of a love there and enough of a bond there where not only that'll do, but it feels like almost as good as the quote unquote real thing. You know, I'd love to see mom and dad more, but you know what I mean? So I could understand that. And there's a certain level, I think when there's a certain level of love and appreciation and reciprocal, you know, kind of embracing going on. I think if your adopted family was cold, that must be horrifying and, you know, unwelcoming or closed off, that type of thing. It's interesting what you say though, Kyle, because I'm entering into this territory. Do you remember this where, you know, my oldest is going to be old enough to date. I'm sure that's in the offing, you know, soon, right? I remember thinking back to those parents of the various girls I dated. I always appreciated the ones, especially now looking back, that sort of embraced you as a son-in-law-ish, even though they knew it was fleeting, right? Like they were welcoming, they were warm, they asked how you were doing, they fed you, they acted like you were part of the family, even though they knew you would be dating this, you know, their daughter for a couple of months, you know, and versus the parents that were very cold, you know, and just kind of treated you like, yeah, whatever type of thing, you know. I remember I dated this girl, Michelle. She was a Jewish girl, super sweet. And her parents were so welcoming. You know, they knew Dagan Moriarty, first of all, wasn't Jewish, right? I wasn't, you know, she lived up in Mount Sinai, like in the hills above Port Jeff. And, you know, it was a whole different thing, but they made me feel like it was, you know, no big deal, you know, and I honestly, I didn't even know it was a big deal until later on in life where it was like, you know, that dynamic of the, you know, the Irish Italian Catholic and the Jewish girl and everything. Her parents were so cool and welcoming and treated me like family and fed me and drove us places because, you know, we were 15, 16 years old, kids, right? But there's such humanity in that, in just kind of embracing someone, even though you know they're temporary. You know, there's there's just, I want to be like that as a parent. You know, I don't want to, there's something funny about being like the rom-com sort of hard ass dad at the dinner table type thing, like giving the guy a hard time.
Could you milk me?
Know, type of thing.
You got to pull that out at some point.
What was that movie? Oh, it was Promising Young Woman, when they have the kid at the dinner table and he's a doctor. He's like a young doctor. And they're like, oh, you know, so-and-so tells us you're a doctor. Your parents must be very proud. And he's like, actually, they're super disappointed. They wanted me to be a DJ.
That's good writing. I love that.
So funny, dude.
Yeah, it's all very interesting. I wanted to bring this up too about the nephews and nieces. Like, what are your interactions with them like? So in this case, you were 3 nephews and 1 niece. Happen to be the ones that I'm fairly close to and familiar with, just geographically and generally speaking. While your kids are much more foreign to me, which is unfortunate, but true, just because I know them much less. So how do you deal with that at family reunions? Like, what are those interactions like with the various characters?
I mean, Dash is my godson and Ayla is my goddaughter. So, but all of them, I mean, and you know, the older ones like Finn and Declan have been around for so long that you just feel such a deep love for them. You know, I enjoyed when they're kids, I think because I'm so young at heart, you know, where it was all, the conversation was all Legos and cartoons and shit like that. And I could relate to them on that level and always tried to connect with them. Just for me, I think I'm lucky because I genuinely love children. I mean, I just like kids. And I think I remember, I am just so deeply in touch with what it felt like at any given age as a kid. You know, what you were thinking, what you were all about, you know, what your MO was, what you were into. Like, I just remember being a kid, you know, and let's be honest, it's probably a big part of it. I haven't really grown up that much, but
you've done pretty well for yourself.
I also enjoy this dynamic as they all get older now, you know, of now the conversations are different. It's not kid stuff, you know, like our little niece, Ayla, I don't think she's Graydon's age. I don't think she'll mind me saying this. She, the night before the wedding, had a dance that she asked a boy to. So now the whole dynamic, they're not little kids anymore. You know, they're in junior high or high school, and they're, you know, our oldest nephew is thinking about college, and the younger ones are deep in their sports and their academics and, you know, dating and girls and boys and all this kind of stuff. It's different, but I try to, because I have so little time with them, I may only see them a few times a year, especially the Virginia-based niece and nephews, is that I try to make that time, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, where it's like, what's up? How you doing? With Declan, he's our oldest nephew. He's an aspiring journalist. So I kind of made the intro with Gene.
Yeah, that was nice of you.
I introduced Declan to Gene at the wedding, the mighty Gene Park. So I want them, I don't know. It sounds weird to say it this way, but I want to remain important to them, even though I don't have a large presence geographically or physically in their life. You know what I mean? Like I want to maintain that bond with them. Not only because they're important to me, but they're, my siblings are very, their moms, are very important to me as sisters. So there's something that's inextricably tied to that, because Dana and Allie are so important to me. Their kids are going to be, it's just like when you have kids, it's the same thing. It's just, and I think I'm just very good at that. You know what I mean? Like that just comes naturally to me. And you know what, man? There's a part of me that just likes the drama-free shit of hanging out with kids. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's just easier than hanging out with adults. All the adults we've been talking about so far, I love spending my time with, but I'd rather spend time with my nieces and nephews than many adults. Let's be honest. There's just something there that's, I don't know if it's the innocence or just kind of the no frills, no nonsense dynamic of that, that it's just kind of, we talk about the fun shit, and it also, I think also staying close, whether it's my kids or my nieces and nephews or my nieces and nephews on Helene's side of the family too, who are awesome kids. Like there's something also that keeps you young and keeps you dialed into the world. And I think keeps you from aging, like we got this going on.
Yeah.
We got the gray beard, but inside there's something inside,
Sure.
This is inevitable, but just in kind of, you're developing a mind and maintaining a mindset of youth. I don't think about it that way, but I think that must be something for me. That must be a component of it where, just staying kind of dialed into what's going on with them. Although some of it already at going on 50 years old is like, Jesus Christ, I don't understand any of this.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck anyone's talking about half the time. And I'm younger than you are, but yeah, it's fun because at these various events and kind of interacting with everyone at the wedding, again, the boys, our sister Dana's 3 boys, I'm very close with them just because I know them for a long time. I've also really tried to, and I shouldn't say a long time, I know them in familiarity and in geography. I, especially the last few years, gotten to see them often. But over time, I obviously knew them better than I think I knew my other nieces and nephew, I should say. And it's funny because I've tried as an uncle to, especially with them, just because it's like getting a layer deep. I don't want to be an uncle to kids where it's like, oh, here you only know Uncle Colin because he sends you money or something like that, right? Or gives you presents. Right. It's like there needs to be a layer deeper than that, which I don't really have with your kids as well as I have with the kids here in Virginia. But since I have that layer and can go much deeper with them, where I am that uncle and I'm able to extract that Uncle Mike energy in a lot of ways. See, like Aunt Joni had the real generous energy, and Uncle Mike has really generous energy too, but it's like a very funny, zany energy, busting everyone's balls. And that's kind of what I do. Like my whole tradition in our family gatherings is trying to get in the background of pictures. I don't know if you know this about me. I always I'll stand they'll be taking a picture and I'll just stand in the background somewhere and just stare straight at the camera. And I try to ruin as many of the pictures that I can. So you can find those. And so I guess what I'm saying is with the nephews, with Dana's boys, I'm able to kind of spoil them, and it comes off as, I hope, as like they'll always remember the uncle that was both around and spoiled them, as opposed to the guy who was just kind of absentee and just sent them things or whatever, which I never had. I never had that uncle. I always had an uncle that was very interactive too. And so I hope that I've generated with them like some sort of memorable relationship. Especially, I've really tried to find a way into their hearts with video games over time. I bought them their PlayStation 3. I bought them their PlayStation 4. I bought them their PlayStation 5. I also bought them their Nintendo Switch. I bought those things at launch for them, basically. Not the PS3, but everything else to kind of be there and like have them make that memory. And one of them, the youngest one, they all play, but the youngest one, Dash, is like really a nerd, like a big nerd. And,
yeah, he really is.
And I'd like to think that like they'll be able to connect that, very similar to how I kind of connect my love of football with Uncle Mike and so on and so forth. And that kind of influence, that passive influence, but that influence that was there nonetheless. And so I'm able to like drop $100 bill on them or whatever and be like, here you go, or like, or hire Dash to like construct the boxes for Super Perils of Baking and so on and so forth. And so I'm thankful for them, and it's fun to interact with them, but I do have very different relationships with them, I think, as well. Declan and I speak to each other like we're adults now, and it's interesting. And I think that that's been the case for a while, but I think I told you, I'm very close with Declan's dad, our brother-in-law, Derek, and we go out once in a while, and we're trying to go out more often. And we went out to get a beer recently as we're trying to start this tradition or whatever. And he picked us up when we were drunk and brought us home, and I was like, it's just very weird.
It's funny how it changes.
Very surreal. And Finley, the middle one, just a sassy gay man, he's my my godson. And he doesn't really seem to want to have much to do with anyone right now. He's at that age, like that ninth grade age,
But so hilarious.
Oh, he is. He's
naturally comedic.
And I try to bust his balls. I just bust his balls constantly but I do it very passively. Like I'll come in and I'm like, hello, and like sit down and like sit with him and how are you? And like just like very over the top with him, and he just rolls his eyes at me or whatever. He's funny. And then Dash, I have a funny relationship with just through video games, and he always just wants to talk about games and all of that too. And actually, Micah and I went to a restaurant we like around here, Chard, for brunch. They do really good brunch, and we went there, and Dana was there with her friend, our sister Dana. So I went over to the table to say hello to her. I asked them not to seat us near you so that it wasn't awkward, So, but I wanted to, so like we weren't in each other's conversations, but wanted to come over. And then she was with her friend, and her friend, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, but she's the mother of Dash's good friend. And she was saying like, oh, you're the cool uncle. I always hear so much. I always hear so much about you. And I'm like,
that's offensive.
Yes.
I don't like this person.
It's because you're not around. You have no chance. That's the whole point. You have no chance. Like you have no prayer, right? And with Ayla, so our sister Allie has a daughter, Ayla, named after the main character in Clan of the Cave Bear, I want to say, right? That's where the name comes from.
That's right.
Because there's an Ayla in our neighborhood. I hear people like, Ayla, come home kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, I wonder which little girl it is. And I want to ask the parents, like if you also got the name from that book. But she's really cute. She's very friendly and very personable and very easy to be around. So
yeah, she's very easygoing
and funny. I also bust her balls constantly. My whole thing with her is that a couple of years ago, or a few years ago now, she just like came into the house, but she was doing something outside, but she had like a helmet on, and I'm like, do you wear that helmet all the time, kind of thing? And so now I always ask her where her helmet is and all of that sort of thing. And
what was it, like a bike helmet?
Yeah, it was just like a bike helmet. But I was like, are you touched? So yeah. And then it was funny with your kids. I notice it. It's like I want to be closer to them, but again, you have that layer deep. It's hard to get there. I was getting there a little bit when I used to come visit you every couple of months with them, where it's like you can kind of penetrate that armor and like pierce the veil a little bit. But it's kind of harder with kids, and kids are more skeptical of you, in my experience, obviously, when they don't really know you very well, So I want to get closer to your kids, but again, don't have the proximal value. So of course I'm not going to be like the cool uncle or whatever to them. They don't know.
You got to push through that with kids. That's the thing. Like I never felt funny trying to push, like with our nephews in Virginia. Like it's the same dynamic. Like I don't get to see them a lot, but you got to just kind of push through. Like you're in charge of it as the adult, You can now classify me as an adult. You might have some kind of problem with that, but compared to them, I'm the adult.
I grabbed both your kids when we were at the wedding and brought them in. My arms. Like
they don't mind stuff like that. I mean, the thing with them is they are kind of shortchanged of our family, especially the ones down south, and with Dad to a certain degree too, because everybody's relatively far away. But the trade-off is, that they are very close to Helene's side of the family. So in some ways, it kind of echoes the way I grew up too. But I don't want to rob them of the other side of the family, because with my dynamic's a little different than mom and dad's, because I am close to my side of the family. There wasn't a falling out. There wasn't sort of a weird energy where, God forbid, our mom passed away, and then the one parent who favored me is gone now, and then you're kind of left with this guy that you never really got along with. It's not the same thing. It's just that geographically we had to make a decision. And what's interesting about it, and kind of I lament a little bit about, is that our geographic sort of preferences are going to be dictated by where the kids go to college, not where you guys are. So we have to kind of steel ourselves to like, all right, this is the way it's going to be.
It would be awesome if you guys were making geographic decisions based on where I was. Where's Colin?
And I talk about, like, Helene and I really love, I don't know how many of our listeners will know it, but there's a little sort of suburban rural pocket not far from Richmond and really not far from our mom in Glen Allen, just north of Ashland. It's a really, really beautiful place with really cool town, really cool Victorian homes. And it's like, it kind of feels like it feels like Doylestown just down south, and I'm like, I could really see us buying and rehabbing old Victorian and stuff like that.
We could do the show in person again.
I know. It would be so, and there is definitely an appealing thing about being close to you guys, especially as Helene's parents age and God willing, they're here for another 25 years. I don't know what's going to how that's going to play out, but there is something about now. Wouldn't that be cool? Now we take a turn to be near my family, but really, realistically, it's going to be dictated by where the kids go to school. And then really beyond that, inevitably where they settle down.
That's what I was going to say. I don't think you should go where they go to, not selfishly. I just objectively, you shouldn't go where they go to school because you have no idea where they're going to end up,
No. And Lilia says that, like,
that puts a lot of pressure on them too. Let them go.
No, and Lilia doesn't want to. She wants to go to school in Georgia, but she already says she wants to live in New York. So it's like, it used to be I'm going to art school in New York.
Go to the island.
Live in New York. Yeah, I know that would be amazing. But she's thinking like a 16-year-old. She's thinking go to school, go to Parsons and live in Brooklyn.
No, I know for her, but I'm saying if you guys wanted to be near her, that would be a way to get back.
Oh yeah,
although just being where you are would be really close enough.
It's close. Yeah. We're fortunate. I mean, really, where it kind of, it would be easy if you had one kid, right? But we have two, and there's no telling. Although my two kids are close to each other, there's no telling where they're going to end up, right? So Great Nerdy talks about going to school in Toronto. Don't ask me why. The other one wants to go all the way to the bottom of our country. So it's like, Jesus Christ, you guys are going to go to school like 30 hours apart.
They don't know fucking anything in Canada. So I don't know that you want to be learning anything.
I feel like Ontario's not Canada.
Ontario is like Michigan. That's like, or Western New York. In my experience, it is very Toronto. When I've been there, is very much like north, like Rust Belt town city with a metropolitan, like a deeply metropolitan vibe, like a more of a New York. But like the outskirts of it, it's very much like the vibes I got, like Detroit. Not bad, but that kind of.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I could see that. I didn't spend much time in the suburbs. A little bit.
Yeah, but that's really most of where I've been is in the suburbs in Toronto for various things.
It does feel like that a little bit. Yeah. I can see
the greater Toronto area. But yeah, the nieces and nephew thing is interesting because you kind of just get the balance. You get to be the cool uncle, the cool aunt. You get to kind of dip in and dip out. Very little responsibility, as much as you can take, really, kind of thing. And that's why I appreciate our aunts and uncles going out of their way for us as kids, because they didn't really have to do that. And they were much still, though I am the cool uncle in quotes to Dash because of our interactions on games and all those things. I've not nearly been as quote unquote good to them as Aunt Joni and Carl and Uncle Mike and Uncle John were to us, as far as like giving them time and all of the rest. And I've only been able to kind of rectify that in the last few years, but they want to do, I feel like, I don't know if I'm wrong on this, but like we go to the movies once in a while or something like that. But I feel like kids these days, I just get the vibe that they kind of want to do, or at least these kids, they just kind of want to do their own thing at their own pace. It's not really about going away or going and doing stuff. And they get a lot of family vacation stuff. Anyway, Dana kind of is a vacation, the Fuhrer of vacations with just the constant.
Yeah. She doesn't like to be home.
No, there's something about that. I've talked to her about that a little bit. I think of like, there's gotta be something about that. What is that? And I think she would identify it. She could speak for herself, but not that she's ever going to do so on the show because she doesn't want to do it. But I think that came from just getting away from like the situation at home. when she was a kid. It's like
Sure.
I think she described it as having like a whole nother life. Like you have a life in sports and a life in academics and at the library where she worked and just being away, being gone. And
Yes,
so that seems to just be her way. Well, I'm the exact opposite. I think from those days, I'm like seeking stability and home, like coziness, that kind of thing.
Permanence.
Right. Yes. So
it does make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, yeah, Dana's very, very, that's very important to her. And yeah, there is some sort of semblance of getting away from the grind, your anxiety, like the day to day, the rat race. Helene's very good with that too. Helene's the one who initiates all of that. And I have a very generally homebody attitude. But once I'm out there, I'm glad we're doing it. You know, glad we're in Toronto. I'm glad we're in Montreal. I'm glad we're in Charleston, wherever we're going, California, wherever we're going.
Charleston.
So, you know, it is interesting though, because I don't know, there's something with the kids too, where again, in just remembering what it's like to be a kid, I also try not to take up too much of their time. Just in figuring like they would rather spend time, the cousins would rather spend time with each other, being kids, even if you're relatively cool adult figure in their life. You don't want to overstay your welcome, or, you know, like I remember, I don't know exactly who it was. Like, I guess those aunts and uncles who I didn't see a lot. And I'm not talking about Aunt Barbara, Aunt Maria, and Uncle Mike. I'm talking about like really removed ones that you saw like once every few years that would send you like, let's say $10 for your birthday.
Right.
And then mom and dad are like, you get on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
You're too young to write a letter. There's no email yet. So what do? You get on the phone and you say, thank you. And you don't have to stay on the phone long, and they're kind of coaching you through it. But you're just thinking those 2 minutes of my life are going to be the most excruciating 2 minutes. It's going to feel like 2 hours.
You have to earn it. Yeah.
That type of thing. But yeah, that's the way you almost think of yourself. Like you and I certainly shouldn't think of ourselves in that capacity. But if you're sensitive to it, you kind of got to think about yourself in that capacity to the kid a little bit. Like, let's get in and out. I'm not going to spend too much time. I'm not going to overstay my welcome. Let me just, you know, do something, maybe have a little conversation, a quip, say something funny, whatever it is, right? Catch up, and then let them just be with each other, you know? And I think it's those adults that are more intrusive that are not really connected to that being a kid anymore. You know, they left that far in the past. They don't remember what it's like. Those are the adults that screwed up for us, because they're the ones that are going to monopolize the time at the wedding. They're going to sit Finley down and talk to him for 35 minutes about something. He doesn't want to be there, you know, but these kids are all raised very polite. You know, they come from very polite stock. So, you know what I mean?
I also feel though that in my experience, I mean, I don't know what other people's experiences were at the wedding, that there was a general vibe of self-awareness. Yeah. I didn't run into anyone that even at Micah's side that I didn't know that like kept us. Or was like uncomfortable and weird about that. Because I've been in those situations countless times. You know?
Yeah.
But for some reason, I just had I think maybe because people appreciated it, I had the excuse of like, I got to go do something else now.
That's good. But especially when there's alcohol involved, you never know.
Oh, totally.
Right? Even somebody who's normally demure and polite could turn into like the one that corners you. Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point. So,
you know, and some people I wouldn't mind being cornered by, and some people it's like, you know what it is, dude? Any single person at that wedding, whether it was the most familiar person in the world, one of you guys, or somebody who I never met before on Micah's side of the family, honestly, I wouldn't mind spending time with any of those people. But you're on the clock. Mm-hmm. You have 4 or 5 hours at this wedding reception, you know. So, and for me, for you guys, a little less so, at least with each other. But for me, it's like I'm going back up to Philly. I'm going to be 350 miles away, 400 miles away from everybody again. You know, really want to maximize my time with these people, you know, and with the right people. And then what really complicated it at your wedding in a good way, though, was the friends, you know, our respective friends, your friends growing up, like Mike Pope, which are my friends, and, you know, my actual friends like PJ, but then our LSM family as well, who were newer friends, Ben and Dust and Gene and Cog and everybody, Travis, people that I genuinely want to spend time with. But it's like you only have so many resources on that clock. So yeah, there is that. Again, it's a good problem to have, but it's like, oh man, how do I juggle this? You know, and I guess family events weren't like that growing up for us because listen, grandma was in Nassau County on Long Island out west. We were out east on Long Island, in Suffolk County. Maybe we were 30 miles apart, 40 minutes apart, whatever it was. That was the extent of it, right? So it wasn't, every minute wasn't so valuable. We almost took it for granted. All right, we can't get to it this Sunday. We'll get to it next Sunday, type of thing. But now, for me, it's like, I might not see you guys again until the spring.
Yeah, sure.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, certainly.
Right, in October. So I'm probably not going to see you guys over the holidays. So it's like, there's definitely that thing of, how do I wring out every bit of value from this one interaction, this one event, this one weekend.
So the final thing I wanted to ask about family gatherings and kind of looking at it through the prism of the wedding was mom and dad. We've gone along enough without bringing them up. They've gotten away with far too much. And it's time for
Dad was like, holy shit. Yeah. Am I getting out of this episode?
We haven't forgotten about you.
Unscathed.
So how was everything with mom and dad? How do you deal with your interactions with them during family gatherings and all the rest? Because I feel a lot of anxiety that you really want. I mean, talk about layers deep with people where you can just get right into things. It's like I really want to explore that more and more when I'm with mom and dad. And it's just that wasn't the place and time. But how were they that weekend for you?
I mean, first of all, they seemed so happy. They seemed both of them individually seemed genuinely happy for the event and sort of very upbeat and, happy for you and Micah, which was cool. The cool thing about it now when I go down to Virginia, which has been the way for, I don't know, at least the last 5 years or so, is that me and Helene and the kiddos stay with mom. So for the weekend, we stay at her house. We shack up with mom and Larry. So, we have that built-in alone time with them outside of the event. So, which is great because I miss mom so much and she misses the kids, and Helene and mom, these are two women that have known each other for 30 years. Like Helene's a daughter, you know what I mean? So we have that built-in time with her. So at the event, because what I'm saying at the event, I could essentially ignore her and Larry. They've had enough of us anyway.
Right. Totally.
Totally. And, dad is someone who I really missed. It's interesting about dad because it's weird with him. Our dad is a retired firefighter. A lot of people know this. He's a therapist who has a very busy practice. So essentially he has conversations all day long. He sees 8, 9, 10 patients a day, 4 days a week. He's dealing with counseling and therapy and grief counseling and everything. So he's in the thick of talking and listening. That's what he does for a living. So there is the aspect now of modern day dad where I feel bad keeping him on the phone. And I'm not a big phone person anyway, but there is not a single person in my life, once we pick up that phone, where we're having a better time talking to each other. We're making each other laugh. And this conversation, which I go into saying, I'm only going to stay on for 5 minutes, turns into an hour and 5 minutes every time. I'm like to a phone call. And it's because we miss each other. You know what I mean? And we have that genuine camaraderie and that genuine catching up every few weeks or whatever it is. It should be more often, but it's almost like it's better. It's even better when we get to see each other in person because it's weird. Philly isn't that far from Eastern Long Island, but I just think there's no other relationship in my life that makes me feel like time goes faster than with me and dad, because he's busy with work. I'm busy with work and the family. He's married. He's got the house. He's got, you don't realize like a day turns into a week turns into a month turns into a year. The time's just flying out the window. So that's the one relationship that makes me feel that the hardest. It's like, wow, like we really have to kind of slow down time and try to be a little better with keeping in touch even more often because we genuinely enjoy each other. And again, like talking about somebody who's been there from day one. That's the thing I think about a lot as an aging man, as an old man now, turning into my Gandalf years over here. It's like Dana, to some degree, all the siblings, but Dana, dad, mom, if our grandparents were still alive, certainly they would play a big part. Aunt Carl, Uncle Mike, Aunt Joni, like these are people that have been there since the inception. I mean, since like every milestone, every grade, every age, like these were the people who played the largest roles in my life, And who more than dad? So it's like that sort of rich tapestry dating all the way back to 1973, December 1973. I don't know. There's something about it now. And I think you could speak to this too, Kyle. We talk about this sometime, you and I, is that mom and dad are aging, so I'm definitely, Helene and I discuss this a lot. Like we're entering those years. Helene's a couple of years younger than me, but we're entering those years now where we're going to be dealing with elderly parents, going into our 50s, our early 50s. Like that's just the way of things. Think back to anyone you've ever known in your life. Like this is what happens. You're getting older and your parents are getting old, essentially. Sorry, mom and dad, but you are getting old. So there again, this has been something that we've been talking about over and over again in this conversation, but there is this thing for me of really wanting to savor every last morsel, every event, every dinner, every interaction, every special occasion, every holiday with them. It's like, there's something, there's this thing of the whole reason why we wanted to do this episode, right? It's like these things are family, the people that mean the most, these gatherings, these events, how much they mean to us and what big part they play in our nostalgia, and thinking about how much that is important to me as an adult, thinking back to being a kid. There's something about that sort of transcending to being an adult now and wanting to hang on to that thing because it's always been important. It's never changed. It's always been a key part, I think, of who I am and my values, and I guess a family, a loyalty, certainly. But even beyond a loyalty, it's like an easy loyalty. It's love. You know what I mean? So, and I guess not to be morbid, but not knowing how long we're going to have that as we currently know it. Right? As people are going to drop one by one. I mean, eventually it's going to happen. I mean, it already happened with my best friend's parents. We lost one. We lost PJ's mom. And then way too soon. And then way too soon after that, we lost his dad. So, and PJ's younger than me. PJ's 3 or 4 years younger than me. So there's that whole thing of like, now you got to really kind of be cognizant of that. And I think it just gives you a level of appreciation. And, with dad, I still say the man's going to outlive me, but I see this with my in-laws who are a little older than mom and dad, but they seem to be, they're great people. I love them so much, but they're aging at an increased rate than mom and dad. Mom and dad are just, for some reason, seem to be aging more slowly than Helen and Charlie. So I think about it with them too. In fact, I think I told you, Helene, we have Helen and Charlie over for dinner every week. Now they were over last night and it's just to spend more time with them and give them more time with the kids. Where it's low key. They don't have to cook. Mm-hmm. They don't have to worry about their house being clean.
Yeah,
they just hop in the car and come over. Really, just come in low key, be a guest, let us take care of it, and easy peasy. And there's that the whole thing. But mom and dad certainly make me think of that. I think we're very fortunate because they don't look their age, right? But they are getting older. So it's like, how long are we going to have it this way? We have it. I feel like there's this thing of we have it so good right now, in a lot of ways, and knock wood. But how long is it going to be that way? So let's just kind of savor it.
I don't know how this translates to other people or to even you, but with dad specifically, and I think I've expressed this before in some sense, but there's something about a son wanting his dad to be proud of him because he feels like, at least I should speak for myself, I feel like I have to earn it, right? It's not that dad loves me any less than mom. It's that there's something about a mother's love for a son that mom will always be my biggest fan. And if I did a podcast up for one person, right? And she'd be my biggest fan. She's my biggest fan now that we do a podcast for thousands and thousands of people. And she would be my biggest fan if I was the most famous podcaster in the world. And I think that dad feels that too, or dads feel that about their sons too. But there's something about dad and maybe just my relationship with him, not even the way he's treated me in any way, because he always encouraged me to do whatever I wanted. And with rare exception, and like I said, acknowledged the things that he didn't understand about my life when I was doing them, my obsession with the internet in the mid 90s and always being on my computer. And like I said, like dad would do things like take my mouse or when he was mad at me, or take my phone cord off my computer, and we had we had some animus between us during the 90s, I think. And it was a tough time. But that aside, I think that even as a 39-year-old successful person, it's like you want your dad to know that you're okay, I guess, and to be proud of where you stand and to finally be able to reflect and be like, things are fine now. And I wonder if dad looks at it like that. You know, I didn't really get a chance to talk to him too much when he was here. I mean, we hung out the night before. I talked to him a bit before I got married, but I wonder if there's like a full circle thing for him where it's like Colin's kind of good now. Colin made his money. Yes. Colin found his professional success. Yes. He did all these different things, but now there's nothing left for him to worry about, or he's kind of complete now as like a project. And I wonder if he looks at it like that. And you like, oh, so I've always kind of sought dad's approval, you know, and,
oh, sure.
And for him to be proud of me. Like I remember, it's sad that it didn't happen, but I remember the memory nonetheless, is that like when HarperCollins, the book publisher, was working with me on a book.
I remember this.
And I was on Long Island when I got my message from them, like my email from them, and talked to them, and they pitched me and everything. And he was like, he was mega proud. Like I that hit a nerve for him in some way. Cause the things where I'm in my eyes, I was like, this book's going to sell 10,000 copies. Dad, I get read by like 5 million people a week. You know, I was at IGN at the time. Like what I'm doing now is much more impressive actually than this, but it spoke to him in that specific way where it's like, yeah, this is the way for him to understand it. Very similar to what I think the live shows have done for the family in terms of understanding the product better and like understanding what we do better. And so I think that's what I walked away from that particular family gathering about with dad was, you know, like mom, I mean, I would take a bullet. Mom knows exactly how I feel about mom, you know, and totally take a bullet for mom. But I know that there's something in the fabric between us that where she's just going to be rah Colin forever. And it's again, not that dad has any less affinity. It's just a father and a son, you know?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
you want that, there's no one in the world I want to be proud of me more than him, or to be impressed with what I'm doing than him. No one else. Yeah. In fact, I could count on two hands the amount of people I even give a fuck to think about what I do, you know, about in any way. But he's kind of like paramount at the apex of that.
Yeah.
And so that was a moment for me at that time where I'm like, I wonder how he feels about this, but it's obviously not the time to ask. And it's not really even about that's not what this is about anyway. So we talk about it here. So he actually got away without me insulting him at all this time.
That wasn't bad, man. It's crazy about dad because I know exactly what you're saying. There is something about that relationship between a father and a son. And our dad was our dad is unique and sort of one of a kind. Like they definitely broke the mold with him in a lot of ways, but there was always something, and I'm sure you felt this too, Kyle, where there was never this thing, certainly of like a father and son's dynamic where it's going to be, you're going to inherit the family business. It's going to be Moriarty and Sons, or you're going to grow up to be a father, you know, a firefighter, like your old man, chip off the old block. There was never that type of thing with dad. It was always the same. It was always like, find your lane, you know, discover your passion, do what you love. Don't waste your talent. There was always this thing of, and mom and dad would both say that. And they would both say, like, it doesn't matter what it is. It literally doesn't matter if you want to be a street cleaner. It doesn't matter. Like, just find it. Find yourself. Find your thing. Find your trade, whatever it is. With dad, I always felt like, I mean, first of all, as a parent, there is some semblance of unconditional love, for sure. 100%. And I know how proud dad is of all his kids, but especially you. And, you know, that level of success, you know, he's not an idiot. He knows like, you know, that's a lot, you know what I mean? And that you really achieved something great. But with dad, I always felt more like, with me personally, it was never about, oh, I'm animating this show for Apple TV, or I'm doing this thing for Netflix, or I'm with DreamWorks or Cartoon Network. It was always more of the integrity. You know what I mean? It was always more of the humanity, the responsibility, the not compromising my standards, you know, that whole thing. I think there was always at the end, Dad's not very demonstrative with words, although he could be very articulate and he's quite a good storyteller. Just at an emotional level, he has a very old school man type of vibe. Naturally, that's just the way he is. But there was always something in just his inflection or his intonation or just his demeanor that said that he was proud of me because I never compromised. I held on to my standards. I didn't give in. I fought. During downtimes, we got layoffs. I got through it. I developed a tough skin, or I did what I had to do in order to survive or put food on the table for the family. It was less about success and more about just the person you are, dealing with success and failure. You know what I mean? Again, it was that all the values he instilled, basically. Work ethic, all of that. It wasn't about making millions of dollars. It was more about, just everything he instilled, right? If that makes sense. And then the success is a big part of that. And of course, like I could just channel that as a future parent of, kids with careers. Of course, you're going to be proud of them when they're successful. I mean, of course, and there's going to be a sense of pride with that because you were a big part of making that happen, as a good parent. So, but yeah. And with Mom too, it's the same thing I think it's a very similar thing, where it's that love. It's really more of trying. It's not win or lose. It's that you went out there and gave it your all, that type of thing. That's really, I think, what speaks to Dad specifically as a person, as a father. But I think, most parents probably feel that. Like, I'm not going to, let's say Graydon grows up to play college basketball, right? And he goes and plays for Princeton or Villanova or one of these big schools over here, right? It doesn't really matter for me if he plays for community college or he plays for one of those big schools. You know what I mean? It's the fact that he went out there and gave it his all and left it on the court. Right. So that's all that, as a parent, that's what you want. You don't want to see your kids squander their talent or not give it 110%. But, that's the interesting thing. The other thing is I'm interested, like there's nothing, Mom and Dad specifically, I guess you to a certain extent, and our sisters, maybe a couple other key people in my life, really close, dear friends. I have a couple that are on this level, is that there's nothing off the table when it comes to conversation. Like I just say it, you know what I mean? Like have that conversation with Dad, because then it's not cornering a person into a conversation they find uncomfortable. It's the fact of maybe they're not even thinking that, you know what I mean? And again, like Dad's a great conversationalist. Like there's nobody I like to engage in just a talk more than him. So if you have questions about that, I mean, I could see how proud he is of all his kids, but that's the type of thing.
I don't even know that it's anything worth talking about. It's like more of between us it is obviously, but you and me, but yeah, more of this ethereal thing that I was wondering about the event. Cause I did ask him one question. I was like, is there any special feeling about a son getting married as opposed to a daughter? And he said, no. And I was like, interesting. Because I would think the answer would be yes to that. Because it's more symbolic in one direction than the other. You're kind of giving the girl. I mean, it's literally you're giving her away, like your old dowry style. Walking down the aisle kind of thing. It's very interesting. So it was, but that's a very egalitarian answer that I would expect from Dad. At the same time, but that was like the only I didn't really get to get too deep with him. First of all, Ramon was there, Nate was there, you were there. There was just a lot of people in and out of the fucking room as I was getting dressed, photographers staging me and doing all this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, before I knew it, the day was gone and then Dad was off. I mean, I don't think I've even spoken to Dad since that night.
Since the big day,
to be honest,
a week and a half ago, not that long ago.
But yeah, that's it.
But it's blink of an eye, man. I warned you. Like I
was
everyone.
Everyone says that, and it was true. You're absolutely right.
It was true, right? Yep. It went by in a flash.
Yeah, it was over. Yeah.
Helene was saying that about our wedding. I remember telling you, and I remember that day of my wedding 21 years ago. Like I really made a tangible effort to hang on to memories. Like sit here and soak it in. Whether that's just looking out at the crowd or remembering how good this food tastes, or a picture moment, or the sun setting that evening, or whatever. Like whatever it was. Because people were really coaching me, whether it was Mom and Dad or PJ's parents, like people were really instilling that in me. Like it's going to go fast. Like you're going to blink your eyes, it's going to be over. So hold on to it. going to have the photography. In our case, we're going to have the videography, but that type of thing. But yeah, it goes really quick. And now, it's in the books, and I love kind of wrapping it all up with this conversation because, that I think a wedding is probably the most important and potentially the greatest and most fun family gathering you could have. You and Micah and I talked about this on Constellation, I think, where it was like she was saying she has her family often does the yearly family get-togethers or family reunions or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's her black side that does they do like a yearly reunion, yeah,
which is so
which
cool.
is cool, yeah, down here.
But a lot of families that don't do that, a wedding is the one time to have like we talked about it on Constellation. It's like essentially the bride and groom's two sides of the families and the bride and groom's set of friends and colleagues. So everybody's bringing 3 families. So you got a combination of really 6 families in there, right? And that's like, we were talking about being like Smash Brothers. Like these people aren't supposed to be in the same
Solid
room
Snake
together,
and
this isn't supposed to work, but I want to see what happens here. But I kind of love that because every kind of Sunday dinner, every communion, every birthday party, every pool party, I love that. Every holiday, every 4th of July, Christmas, like everything that we've known growing up was just kind of a smaller version of the wedding. And, weddings like Aunt Joni and Uncle John's wedding, you were saying. My wedding, Dana's wedding, like it was like Allie's wedding just this past May. Like we're all
married now. The question is who's going to get married next? Out of the 4 of us.
Well, it's going to be Junior.
No, yeah, Junior, our cousin Junior, who's Aunt Joni's older kid of 2 kids.
Yes,
he gets married 420, and that's and that is intentional, as far as I understand. So, so I'll be there, loud and proud. Hopefully, I'll still fit in it. I'm going to try to wear my suit one more time before I get too fat for it. From the wedding.
You should be fine.
But yeah, Dave, this was a good decompression for that. It's been on the noggin, like the gathering of the family, the specific permutations, as I said on Constellation, just the idea that these people will never really be together ever again. They're really just one time that night, 2 ships in the night, just going. And it's cool. I like that kind of stuff. And the memories that were created. And I'll say, you said it, and a lot of people told me, they're like, you got to understand that this day is going to go by in a flash. That was something many, many people said, and they're absolutely right. And I, like you, tried to be deliberate in the moment. I remember a lot of things. Mike and I were laughing and having a good time as we were driving around a golf cart, taking pictures in various places with the photographers before even the wedding. And yeah, just trying to be with everyone, speak to everyone, have different conversations, pull the photographer over for these different pictures that we took. And yeah, it was great, but it all came back to family and just thinking about gathering everyone together and how we kind of interact with them at these various events. So that was fun to get into. I appreciate you.
That's the keystone. That's the key. The family is the keystone. I mean, what also is interesting? Does this speak to you? Because again, my kids seem so disinterested in this, but a wedding is a great example, like a little microcosm of this. But I love examining any 2 people's in the room relationship. And I remember doing this as a kid. Like being at the barbecue and being like, oh, what's the relationship like between Aunt Joni and Uncle Mike, and see that interaction. Or, between Uncle Vito, who we don't see a lot, and Mom, like any 2 people in the room, like what are their origins? How do they feel about each other? Our cousin Angie and Grandpa, whoever it is, I could take any 2 people and just kind of study the way they kind of associated with each other. And I was doing that, you kind of do that at the wedding too. Like what's going on between Uncle Mike and Finley, or, any 2 people, like Aunt Barbara and Uncle Michael, like whatever. I'm so fascinated by like the anthropology of that. Like there's something so fascinating about that to me.
Yeah, totally.
I think it comes from both of our love of like just hearing family stories and maybe the way a relationship started of the older people that were around before we were and stuff like that.
And it's just I love the idea of just the fast friends sort of thing, where I feel this way about like Uncle Steve and Uncle Richard and everyone, where I'm like, give me one night with you, Uncle Richard. And it sounds perverted. That's not what I mean. Give me one night like with Uncle Richard and we're going to have a fucking great time. In fact, I told you, I did get drunk with them at Nancy, our dad's wife's old house on the Long Island 5 or 6 years ago. We had a night like that and it was hysterical.
Uncle Rich is awesome.
They're fucking awesome. They're great. You know, it's just like you the fast friends there is just beyond the facade, but you just can't get to it. You know, and
right. We'd have to spend more time.
Right. It makes me want to have a real family reunion. Like, why doesn't, maybe there's not a need or a want, but on the Moriarty side, like a really comprehensive Moriarty family reunion. Nothing to do with the Italians.
Right.
So all dad's people, dad's siblings and all of their kids and their kids' kids cousins. And so on. Yeah. Our cousins, right?
Yeah.
Who I really only know from like Instagram and stuff at this point.
Yeah.
I used to know them better when I was a kid, but like that, I wonder if there would be any interest in doing that. Like, I'm not going to organize it, but I wonder if that's ever come up, because that would be probably a solid 40 or 50 people, probably.
A lot.
Right?
We have a lot of cousins on that side of the family.
Right. That'd be interesting.
I would love it. I mean, I think you would need to take a weekend.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
You couldn't do a 5-hour event. It would just be too, we haven't seen each other in so many decades in some cases.
I should ask Dad about that. I wonder if that's ever come up.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
I love that idea. Yeah, there's something about that. And something about like Uncle Rich and Uncle Steve are a great example. Like those two have known each other for 50 fucking years. You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't it be so cool to be a fly on the wall of just spending time with them and seeing what their relationship is actually like, rather than seeing them from afar every 5 years?
Yeah, they're like Uncle Mike and Uncle John times 2, basically, in terms of time, which is interesting.
Hell yeah, dude. There's such a rich history there. It's like, I'm not asking to be part of it. I can't be. It's, you know what I mean? But I just want to get a little taste.
Picture it, a gathering at a nice hotel in like New York City or something. You walk in the lobby, the big Moriarty bird, is there.
I love it. The crest.
Yeah. And and we go from there, we get fucking crazy.
On the way out, I thought you would find this entertaining because, you're younger than me. You don't remember this, but Uncle Mike, he's always such a big part of these nostalgic conversations, but a big part of me growing up with him at especially family gatherings, which again was oftentimes weekly for Sunday dinner, didn't have to be a special occasion, although there were plenty of those as well. But it would always be this thing of him, same as modern day Uncle Mike, busting balls, razzing, teasing, always in a way, by the way, always with a warmth, never a cruelty. Always somehow, even though he was getting the better of you, had that talent of making it feel like it was because he loved you. It was never a thing where you would go away crying. You'd be laughing at yourself. He has a great knack for that. But I remember, I'm old enough to remember that he used to do that to everybody, and everybody expected it. And it could be the kids or it could be our great grandparents. He would bust everybody's balls. And he was so good at it and so charismatic that no one would ever get mad at them. Again, everybody would just walk away laughing. And I remember him one night, our granny, our great grandmother, who died when I was 10, I think. I remember him busting her balls so bad one night. I remember her sitting on the rocking chair watching Golden Girls or whatever she would do after dinner, right? Kind of putting her feet up because she was the one who did the cooking and the cleaning and everything. And just going nonstop on her. Like, I don't even know what he was saying to her, but I just remember thinking, like, how is he getting away with it? I was like 7, and so it was interesting. But I remember, like, no matter what you were wearing, no matter what your hair, it could be a haircut when you were really little, it could be a toy, he was going to bust your balls and ask questions. And you know what it was? I think it really showed that he wanted to be involved. I remember once I was like 12, I was wearing these Chuck Taylors, these Converse All-Stars. They were like really garish, all kinds of bright colors. They were like paint splattered or something. And I knew putting them on at home a full-on hour before I saw Uncle Mike that was going to be the first word out of his mouth. And of course he's like, what the hell's on your feet? Like, type of thing. But it was his way of showing that he was paying attention to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or, my haircut, or, what the hell's going on with your hair, type of thing. Or, when I was really little, like, what's going on with this toy? Let me check this thing out, this weird thing, this weird robot or whatever. And I think I try to channel some of that energy in my interactions with our nieces and nephews. Like, I kind of model myself after feeling like, and I don't think I'll ever be as naturally funny as Uncle Mike. He just has that thing. but definitely in admiring that, and wanting to be like that. So I always remember him, it didn't matter if he was going up or if he was going down. He would just, everybody in his orbit was getting lampooned.
Totally.
Was getting blasted.
Oh, definitely.
And everybody, the thing is, everybody, they didn't tolerate it. They loved it. They loved it. He really, I mean, if there's a nucleus that all this is built around, it might be Uncle Mike.
Yeah, you might be right. I mean,
that's why we got to get him on the show.
Totally. Yeah, he would do it. No doubt. I don't think there's any doubt he would do it.
He'd be good at it too.
Yeah, he would be fun to hang out with. And I think he likes his little, well, I don't know. I'd have to ask him. And Carlos certainly likes talking about his like little piece of LSM fandom that like people are curious about him, And then
he's the Boba Fett.
Oh yeah, he is. He's like the Boba Fett.
Yeah. As soon as he comes on, he's going to lose a little of that luster.
Right. Totally. He's going to take his mask off or something. And yeah, no. He might even grow his mystique because he is a very naturally funny person. And I'd like to think that I actually feel like, it might just be a carbon copy of it just from being around it, but I just feel like he and I are very similar in terms of our humor, like the way we like to do things and just constant silliness. And
yeah. It is a silliness.
I really don't like, it's like I said in my vows, like I don't take things seriously. Like I don't want to take things seriously. I just simply don't. We are in this house. We are so inappropriate. It's like not even some people be like, whoa, some of the jokes that we're saying to each other sometimes, but it's like, we don't, or the things we're joking about, but it's like, no, I don't want to be serious. I'm not a serious person. I'm not. That's why it's so funny when people are like, we went and did opened a joint bank account at Bank of America. We were talking about our business and they were asking us a bunch of questions. And I'm like, it sounds a lot more serious than I am. It looks a lot more serious than it is.
Did you say that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's like always having those kinds of conversations with people.
I love that. I love saying that, especially to a banker in this serious environment. Because really, that's the right attitude. Because why does everything have to be this dire? Do we have to be this uptight? You know what
totally.
I mean?
I got to admit, I do this on purpose a lot, but I went just because I like, it's very San Francisco of just dressing however you want and just making people guess about, you look homeless half the time in San Francisco and you can be a millionaire. Right. And so I went to the bank intentionally in like sweatpants and like an Islander sweatshirt and just tried to look kind of schlubby just because I think it's funny to do that. Yeah.
I love that.
I'm not trying to put on any airs here. Chesterfield County. All right, my friend. No, that was fun. That was good to catch up and discuss it.
Recap.
Yeah, it was. And we can now, that was the postscript of the wedding. We can have the wedding conversation and now we can finally move on. Let's end this conversation, this knockback like we do each and every week with a dad joke. Prepare yourself.
My gosh.
Yeah.
When you were saying earlier, as I dig these out, you had mentioned an old show that we did and it was on our first year, within our first
Number
year.
45. Yeah. Holiday memories.
45.
December
like, how did
2018.
We get that deep so fast? And even I forget that we were weekly at one time with Knockback.
Until this year, I think. Yeah.
Yes, until 2023. Now we're weekly with Constellation.
Well, I was going to say it hasn't changed for you. If anything, your schedule of podcasting is twice as crowded now as it was last year because you do Punching Up and Knockback, which would be just the same as doing Knockback. Plus, you do Constellation every week, so you have your plate full, my friend, and you'll be doing.
It's fun,
and we love. And I've loved having you, by the way, on the different shows. You're welcome on any of the shows. It's really a time limit thing for Dagan because he has a real job and like real, family and like real responsibilities. I wake up at noon, and walk the dogs. And I don't think anyone in my neighborhood has any idea what's going on. Like half the time it's like, who is this person?
God bless you. You get to do what you do, kind of be your own boss. You're Joe, the boss of your own body, as James Caan says in Heat and Thief, and be very successful, right? Have this huge base audience and still wake up at noon. You are literally, I don't want to hear anybody else saying they're living the dream. You are literally living the dream. Hold on to that. It's like Adam Sandler with the fat kid. Hold on to it as long as you can.
Yeah, it's true. And it just came up on Sacred Symbols, our obsolescence, like our coming obsolescence as podcasters.
I heard you. I've listened to that.
And that's really something that I think it came up because because we were talking about that Boogie documentary, and I was saying that Boogie bothers me because he was someone who didn't realize how lucky he was. So he abused it. And I was always aware, no matter what, I worked hard and all the rest took risks. Yes. But I have always been aware of the major component that luck has played my entire career. And that is why I've always been preparing since my career started for my career to end. is because that's something you can't control. That's why that story, people blowing their money bother me so much, because it's like, why couldn't you just have done this the right way? And
I understand that. And
set yourself up for life. Like my whole mentality, my entire career has been, how can I set myself up to live the best possible life, the most responsibly, right? And so to see someone get, orders of magnitude more in terms of fame and money and blow it, it fucking makes you want to kill someone. Because it's like, dude, you would, if I were you,
you'd be set for life.
God. Oh my, better than that, So that's why, so that's why it came up. But I am, I'm always preparing for my obsolescence, I guess is what I'm saying.
You do have that bomb shelter sort of survivalist mentality, which is good. I think, I would not caution you. I would try to instill a little more, also enjoy it.
Yeah, no, totally. It's funny though, because Micah was a friend of hers, husband's lost his job. And I was like asking her, are they nervous, blah, blah, blah. And then I just started like rattling off advice. And I'm like, by the way, I've never been laid off or fired before. I'm just, I've been preparing for this moment since I was like 22. So what he should do is like get his unemployment benefits immediately and do this and do that and do that. And so like my mind, just even for someone else, just the fucking lizard brain inside of me that's still 22 years old in San Francisco being like, oh my God, you're going to get fired tomorrow. You're going to get fired tomorrow. You're going to get fired tomorrow, which was like my existence for the first few years I was there, until you're comfortable enough to realize how valuable you are. And then you realize you're not going to get fired.
Wow. You escaped. You dodged many bullets.
Oh my! Tell me about it, dude. I am the layoffs going on in the industry right now, and just everywhere in animation too, and in parallel industries.
Bad. It's bad.
It seems very reminiscent of. I got hired at IGN right before the recession began, so we had layoffs literally every year I was there.
I remember that,
and it was scary. Like it's so interesting when people are like, oh, I'm 40 out. I work, I work to live and all that. It's like, that's cool, man. If I worked to live at IGN, I would have gotten laid off the first time, because I was there on weekends and doing all this kind of stuff and just trying to prove my value and my worth. And it was scary. And now people are in that situation again. But the unfortunate reality is that there probably is no bounce back from this. This is a great leveling, unfortunately,
Yeah. I think it is a big, people refer to it as a reset, and I kind of hate it, but it is appropriate.
It turns out that Netflix can't spend $200 million on a cartoon series that 5 people watch. And it turns out that PlayStation can't spend $300 million on a game that 500,000 people play. Like you gotta, the whole metric is fucked. So yeah, that's the situation. But anyway, I'm interrupting the end and the dad joke day. So
not at all, my friend. We got these are Allie, our sister Allie gave us these dad joke cards.
Nice.
I think I've showed you guys these before. I got one here that I don't think I've read yet. Kyle, just a little late for Halloween. What kind of noise does a witch's vehicle make?
Broom.
You got this is the first one you got in a long time.
I know, I'm like 300 probably, like
broom.
Yeah. Yes.
You got it, dude. Wow.
It's like a pitcher getting a single, He's
there. Oh my God. He's again for a while.
he lobbed one in the fucking left field over the second baseman.
Hey, how dare you, Ohtani, my friend. Everybody else.
Dude,
it would be weird.
I can't believe he's going to be a free agent. Right. Like, I was hearing that he might make like $1 billion on his contract, which is, I wonder if that's true.
First,
because that's not that crazy, because you already have contracts in the $300 million range. Right. And so,
yes, that's true.
And he's a pitcher and a DH. So, and he's pretty much at the top of both of those games. So you can see that getting to like 700 million or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy. I hear he wants to play on the West Coast. So I don't think I don't follow baseball very closely, but at all.
Me either anymore.
But I heard he wants to play on the West Coast. So I don't think he's even an option for the Yankees, but
it's fascinating. Or else he would go to the Mets.
That would be, they might as well spend
with their fucking payroll.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're not, who are we to complain?
Yeah, it's true. Evil empire.
All right, my friend, let's get out of here. Dig.
All right, my friend.
Good to see you. Thank you for your time today. Appreciate you. Thank you all out there.
You too.
For your love, kindness, and support. Last Stand Media. Patreon.com/LastStandMedia. LastStandMedia.store for merch. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. Knockback, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. Knockback's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Knockback, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.